I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time figuring out where the heck 2024 went. Seriously, it feels like only yesterday that I was making a video joking about how quickly 2023 went by, and now here we are a full year later. Yeah, let's not dwell on that. That's depressing. Instead, we thought it would be fun to honor 2024 in the best way that we know how, by taking a look back at all the truly bizarre stuff in the world of crime news that happened this year. Today, we'll specifically be focusing on stories from our Crimes of the Week series, but if you like this video, be sure to look out for another compilation at the end of this week covering ones from the international edition of our show as well. As always, keep in mind that because this is a compilation-style video, these segments have not been edited since they first appeared on their respective lists, so references to specific charges as well as other small details may no longer apply. Lastly, before we get into the video, we wanted to give a huge thanks to every single one of you out there who tuned into the channel this year. We know that there's a ton of other places where you could have spent your valuable free time, and we're both flattered and extremely grateful that you chose to spend some of that time with us. Have a safe and happy new year, and here's to an even better and weirder 2025. Authorities in St. Clair County, Alabama say that a local man is facing multiple charges this week after he allegedly jumped into the aquarium at a popular outdoor sporting goods retail chain and refused to cooperate with police. The whole thing started just before 9:40 p.m. on January 4th at the Bass Pro Outlet in the community of Leeds. The store was getting ready to close for the night when out of nowhere, employees and shoppers started to hear a strange commotion. That commotion was allegedly the sound of 42-year-old George Owens, who had just stripped off all of his clothes and done a cannonball into the store's large aquarium. According to reports, the 42-year-old refused to get out of the large tank, and as a result, police were called. Unfortunately, Owens wasn't much more cooperative with them either. When officers arrived at the store, the 42-year-old briefly got out of the water, but apparently that was just to shout obscenities at them before diving back in. He proceeded to swim around for a while once again before attempting to climb out over the glass, only to fall several feet onto the concrete below. Bystanders who witnessed the events claimed that it appeared Owens was knocked out from the fall, at which point police placed him in handcuffs. After regaining consciousness, the 42-year-old reportedly became a handful once again. After officers escorted him out of the store in a blanket and tried to place him into a police cruiser, he allegedly kicked one of the vehicle's doors, damaging the frame. However, eventually he was taken into custody. It's now believed that Owens may have been suffering from some sort of mental health crisis during the incident. Immediately before jumping into the Bass Pro Aquarium, the 42-year-old was reportedly acting erratically and crashed his vehicle into a pole in the store's parking lot. At the time of this recording, he is facing a number of charges, including public lewdness, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, second-degree assault, 2 counts of criminal mischief, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. Representatives from North Carolina's Boone Police Department say that they recently dealt with quite the bizarre situation after a female suspect allegedly became so enraged at the fact that she was being arrested that she literally chewed up the back seat of one of their cruisers. According to reports, the situation took place sometime on January 2nd when police were called about an alleged assault involving a 32-year-old woman. When they arrived at the scene, the unidentified woman was placed under arrest, who apparently wasn't very happy about how things were playing out. As soon as she was placed in the back of one of their vehicles, she allegedly began to bite whatever she could with her teeth. Apparently, officers only noticed the damage after they had arrived back at the station, and the 32-year-old had been taken in for processing. By that time, she had ripped and chewed up a large amount of padding in the back seat, with police estimating she did about $650 worth of damage to the vehicle. In a Facebook post after the incident, Boone police put up a photo of the aftermath, writing, quote, "That moment when you are so angry you were arrested that you decide to chew the seat. We may need to invest in Kevlar seat covers. Wow." Understandably, the post prompted a number of amusing responses. One commenter joked, "You are not you when you're hungry. Grab a Snickers." while another pointed out that the woman probably would have thought twice if she knew the kind of stuff that went on in the back seat of police vehicles. At the time of this recording, authorities say that they are still deciding whether to file additional charges against the woman for the damage to the cruiser.
Authorities in New London County, Connecticut say that a 62-year-old man is facing a number of charges this week after he allegedly dug up the yard of a home in his neighborhood, threatening the family that lived there and giving a rather bizarre excuse for his actions. The whole thing began at around 10:15 a.m. on January 14th when police in the town of Ledyard received a call from a local woman. The woman said that her neighbor, later identified as 62-year-old Mark Uterstadt, appeared to be in the middle of some sort of freakout. That morning, he had shown up at their house unannounced and had started to dig up their front yard with a rock rake. The woman said that when her husband went outside to tell Uterstadt to stop, he refused to leave, took a swing at her husband with the rake, and threatened him and their 2 young kids. The 62-year-old also claimed that he owned the neighborhood, and most strangely of all, had accused the family of being pirates. When police arrived at the scene, Uterstadt was placed under arrest. By that time, he had apparently changed his reasoning about why he was digging up the yard, now stating that he did it because he believed his neighbors were trying to install a water line. The 62-year-old is now facing charges, including risk of injury, second-degree threatening, fourth-degree criminal mischief, breach of peace, and simple trespass.
Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a 42-year-old woman is facing new charges this week, following a harebrained scheme in which she allegedly planned to try and fool a court-ordered drug test with dog urine. The whole thing started back on December 28th, when 42-year-old Jessica Beatty was arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia and driving with a suspended license. She was later freed on her own recognizance, though since this was apparently far from her first drug-related arrest, the order came with the stipulation that Beatty submit to drug testing while out on release. Fast forward to January 11th, when Beatty reported for her first test at the Pinellas County Misdemeanor Probation Unit. It was here, when prompted to provide a urine sample, that she allegedly tried to sneak a phony one in instead. After being caught by probation officers, Beatty apparently confessed that she planned to try and fool the test. Her plan was to use pee that she said she had collected from her aunt's dog. Now, in case it wasn't already obvious, this would not have worked, even if Beatty had somehow managed to get the phony sample past officers. According to OHS Health and Safety Services, a California-based company that conducts these kinds of drug tests, animal urine and human urine has a bunch of noticeable differences, and in this case would have been easily detected. According to reports, Beatty was arrested after revealing her plan and has been charged with urine testing fraudulent practices. The order freeing her was also revoked, and she is now back in jail in connection with her previous arrest. Reports do not mention how Beatty was collecting the dog urine that she attempted to use in her scheme. On this channel, we've covered a lot of stories of people who've ruined their lives for pretty questionable reasons. I have to say, though, the subject of this next case might just take the cake. Authorities in Marion County, Indiana say that a local man is facing a slew of new charges this week after he allegedly attempted to trade with employees at a local restaurant, offering them illegal drugs in exchange for a deep-fried appetizer. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime late on January 14th, when 25-year-old Justin Carpenter had a hankering for Buffalo Wild Wings. In particular, his favorite appetizer, deep-fried pickles. After calling up a friend, Carpenter drove to the nearest Buffalo Wild Wing location in Lawrence, where he attempted to order his food. However, he soon found himself in a completely different kind of pickle. Upon being informed that it was after midnight and the kitchen was closed, Carpenter came up with an idea. He started chatting up the employees, allegedly offering them a wide assortment of drugs in exchange for food, stating, quote, "If you make us some fried pickles, I'll make it worth it." As if this already doesn't sound bad enough, don't worry, it gets worse. Not only was Carpenter already wearing an ankle monitor in connection with prior drug-related offenses, Some of the employees he was trying to bargain with were apparently minors. Needless to say, Carpenter's offer was not accepted since, Buffalo Wild Wing doesn't operate on the barter system. Despite this, the 25-year-old found a way to dig his grave a little deeper. Before leaving, he allegedly left 3 small bags of weed on the restaurant's front counter, telling the manager, quote, "Give those bags to the kids." At some point, police were called, who found Carpenter at a nearby gas station. A search of his car turned up more marijuana, as well as cocaine, oxycodone, Xanax, THC vape cartridges, and some additional as-yet unidentified white powder. Following his arrest, the 25-year-old was slapped with a number of new misdemeanor and felony drug charges on top of those he was already facing. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody.
Authorities in Houston County, Alabama say that a 39-year-old woman is facing charges following a bizarre incident earlier this month in which she allegedly called in a fake crime because she was scared of the weather. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on January 9th when police in the city of Dothan received a 911 call from a local woman named Kelly Carol Ginebra. The 39-year-old allegedly stated that she needed officers at her property right away because there was a burglary in progress. However, after responding to the scene, police quickly determined that no such crime was taking place. They questioned Ginebra, who allegedly revealed the truth about why she had called. She was scared of the bad weather that was going on that day, and she wanted officers to come to her house quickly. While there apparently was quite a bit of rain and a couple of tornadoes spotted in the area that day, if anything, this is arguably all the more reason why Ginebra shouldn't have been wasting police resources. Unsurprisingly, she was arrested after admitting to the fake call and has now been charged with making a false report.
Representatives from South Carolina's Lawrence County Sheriff's Office say that a local couple are facing charges this week after they led deputies on multiple chases across 2 counties, traveling in a badly spray-painted car that was allegedly full of animals. The whole thing started at around 9 a.m. on January 29th, when Lawrence County deputies spotted a black Honda sedan with expired tags in the town of Graycourt. The man behind the wheel, later identified as Joshua Harvey, was also driving erratically and appeared to be swerving in and out of lanes, causing police to attempt to perform a traffic stop. Rather than pulling over, though, Harvey allegedly sped off, prompting a chase. This continued until Harvey crossed over into Greenville County. At this point, deputies decided to call off the pursuit, opting instead to search the area around Harvey's home. The tactic appeared to work when the Honda was spotted again around 2:45 p.m. This was despite Harvey's comical and ridiculous attempt to fool authorities by spray painting part of the vehicle white. Even with the laughably bad paint job, Harvey managed to get away from authorities a second time when they once again decided to forego a chase due to safety reasons. It was around the end of the school day, and police didn't want to put anyone in danger. Harvey's luck finally ran out a little while later when he was seen for a third time on Highway 14 heading towards Interstate 385. The vehicle was easy to spot, not just because of the spray paint, but because his girlfriend, Rosie Smith, who was now behind the wheel, was also driving recklessly. When the vehicle was finally immobilized, officers found one final surprise waiting for them in the back seat. It turned out that in addition to the couple, passengers in the car included a dog, a cat, and 4 chickens. Harvey and Smith were arrested at the scene and are now each facing charges. Harvey was charged with failure to stop, while Smith was charged with failure to stop, DUI, 2 counts of ill treatment of animals, driving under a suspension, and other charges.
Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a New York man was placed under arrest this week after he took his truck on a joyride into the ocean on a closed beach, then gave a bizarre excuse for his actions. According to reports, the whole thing started just before 9 a.m. on February 6th when Volusia County officers were called to the oceanfront in the city of New Smyrna Beach. Lifeguards had contacted them after spotting a man in a white Dodge Ram pickup truck who appeared to be driving his vehicle into the water. In footage of the incident, the suspect, 48-year-old New York man Jason Bruskovich, can be seen driving through the waves and backing up directly into the surf. At one point, he even appears to attempt a donut. At the time, authorities say that the beach had been closed due to severe winds and high tide, and there was a real danger of the 48-year-old and his vehicle being swept away. He apparently got onto the beach in the first place by driving around its closed gates, which were clearly marked "Do Not Enter." Of course, that didn't stop Bruskevich from giving police a strange excuse when he was subsequently placed under arrest. While speaking to officers while being detained, he can be heard saying, quote, "It's not my fault the truck don't surf," and "I thought I was in England." As ridiculous as the situation was, it doesn't seem like the 48-year-old is going to be facing any penalties that are that severe. He was charged with violating a local county ordinance and failing to pay a vehicular access fee and was held on $200 bond. Authorities in Calgary, Alberta say that a local drug dealer's entrepreneurial spirit may have landed him in jail this week after he recently tried a rather unique marketing technique to drum up new business. According to reports, the whole thing started on Christmas Eve 2023 when Calgary police received a tip about unusual drug activity outside of a casino in the city's downtown. When they looked into the situation, they learned that someone had been handing out business cards to patrons of the business, ones that had quite the interesting free sample attached, a small baggie of cocaine. With little other information on the business card other than the name Alex Lee, authorities didn't have much to go on. However, after 6 weeks of investigation, they were apparently able to crack the case. On February 3rd, officers conducted a traffic stop on a white 2020 Toyota Tundra. What they found inside was enough to arrest the driver, 30-year-old Saeed Amir Razavi, as well as help them to obtain a search warrant for his residence on Beaconsfield Place, Northwest. During the subsequent search, police recovered $1,280 in cash, 60 grams of cocaine that had been divided into more than 50 small baggies, and most damning of all, a box of those business cards with the name Alex Lee on them. At the time of this recording, Razavi has been charged with 2 counts of trafficking a controlled substance, 1 count of possession for the purpose of trafficking, and 3 counts of possession of proceeds of crime under $5,000. He has since been released from custody, with his next court date scheduled for February 26th.
Representatives from California's Beverly Hills Police Department say that they recently captured a not-so-smooth criminal after he was spotted during the middle of a burglary and attempted to flee, only to be captured on camera taking an unplanned plunge into the victim's pool. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime back on January 6th, when a homeowner called police about a burglary in progress at their residence on the 300 block of South Palm Drive. The victim wasn't home at the time. However, they were alerted to what was going on after security cameras there activated and showed that an unknown man was inside. When officers responded to the scene, the suspect, later identified as 36-year-old David Verdun, reportedly tried to flee, but quickly found himself in a bit of a pickle. After climbing out a back window, he realized he was going to need help getting over the high backyard walls. For a moment, it must have seemed like Verdun was in luck when he found a ladder that was long enough to get over the wall. However, that luck was quickly about to change in a pretty hilarious way. And thankfully, an aerial police drone was there to capture this beautiful footage. After taking his embarrassing impromptu dip into the pool, Verdun apparently tried to hide in the yard, but he was quickly found by police. He was arrested and is currently facing burglary charges. Authorities in Oconee County, South Carolina say that a local woman is in custody this week after she allegedly crossed state lines during a car chase and damaged a cemetery, then offered a rather bizarre excuse for her actions. The whole thing started one evening last week when deputies from the Oconee County Sheriff's Office spotted a woman driving recklessly down Interstate 85. They attempted to pull her over, but she allegedly refused, prompting a chase. That chase reportedly continued over the state line into the city of Lavonia, Georgia, where the woman pulled an even more desperate maneuver. According to police, she attempted to cut through a local cemetery, hitting and damaging a number of graves in the process. She disabled her vehicle a short time after this, at which point she attempted to flee on foot, but was quickly captured. Following the woman's arrest, she apparently had this to say. She claimed that she had run from police and cut through the cemetery because she was, quote, late for an appointment. Needless to say, this excuse did not fly with authorities, who now say that the woman will spend some time in local custody before being transported back to South Carolina to face charges. At the time of this recording, the woman's name has not been released. Authorities in the city of Boaz, Alabama say that a 27-year-old local mother is facing child abuse charges this week after she allegedly forced her young son to walk home from school as punishment, then ran him over after the situation got out of hand. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 3:30 p.m. on February 9th, when the mother in question, Sarai Rachel James, picked up her 7-year-old son from school. When she did, she learned from the boy's principal that he had gotten in trouble for something earlier that morning. Deciding that her son needed to be punished, James reportedly stopped her vehicle shortly after leaving the school and told the 7-year-old to get out. She said as punishment, he would have to walk the rest of the way home, a distance of about 8 blocks. This went on for some time, with James reportedly driving alongside her son or slightly behind him, until at one point she apparently slowed down. That's when the boy apparently grabbed one of the door handles of the car, presumably in an attempt to get back inside. Rather than stopping, James allegedly accelerated, causing the 7-year-old to be dragged underneath. One of the vehicle's rear tires ran over the boy, causing abrasions to his back and the side of his head. While thankfully the child's injuries were not all that serious, following the incident, police rightfully pointed out that the boy never would have been in that situation in the first place if his mother hadn't decided to punish him. I would take it a step further. He never would have been in that situation in the first place if his mother wasn't a idiot. According to reports, James was arrested after all of this and has now been charged with aggravated child abuse. She has since been released on a $50,000 bond, though has been barred from having any contact with her son. Another 53-year-old woman who was reportedly in the car at the time was charged with endangering the welfare of a child.
Representatives with California's Palo Alto police say they dealt with quite the bizarre vehicle theft case last week after a woman allegedly stole a delivery van full of packages, but her motive apparently had nothing to do with the merchandise inside. The whole thing started at around 3:30 p.m. on February 22nd, when Palo Alto police received a call from an Amazon delivery driver. The man said that he had been completing his rounds in the 400 block of West Charleston Road when suddenly his van had been stolen. Specifically, the man said that while making a delivery to a house, he had momentarily hopped out of his gray Ford van, leaving the vehicle on and the keys in the ignition. He returned just in time to see a woman driving away, pulling a U-turn in the vehicle and heading south. He said the van was filled with undelivered packages. Thanks to tracking technology in the vehicle, police were quickly able to get on the phone with Amazon dispatchers who were able to provide them with the van's real-time location. Officers followed the stolen vehicle as it bizarrely headed to the parking lot of an Amazon facility in the city of San Jose. That's where they arrested the suspect, 36-year-old Elena Flores. All of the merchandise was apparently accounted for. Following her arrest, Flores claimed that she was never actually trying to steal anything. She said she, quote, just needed to get back to San Jose, and that was the reason she took the van. At the time of this recording, Flores is facing multiple charges, including felony vehicle theft and for committing a felony while out on bail. Authorities in the city of Ashtabula, Ohio, say that a pair of women are now facing felony charges this week after they allegedly used a dead man to fraudulently withdraw money from a bank in what has been described as a Weekend at Bernie's-style theft scheme. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on the morning of March 4th, when 55-year-old Laureen Ferrallo and 63-year-old Karen Kasbaum awoke to find that Karen's 80-year-old boyfriend, Douglas Lehman, whom they lived with, was dead. Rather than calling 911 or otherwise reporting the death, though, police alleged that the women loaded him into the passenger seat of his car and headed out for a drive. Their destination? Douglas's bank. Upon arriving at the bank, the women went to the drive-through window where they made sure to prop up the 80-year-old's body to make it look like he was still alive. This apparently fooled the teller, who allowed them to withdraw $900 from Douglas's account. To their credit, this was reportedly not the first time the women had withdrawn money from the account. In the past, they had been allowed to do so as long as Douglas was present in the vehicle. After successfully getting the cash, Farello and Kasbaum reportedly drove to the nearby Ashtabula County Medical Center emergency room, where they promptly dumped the 80-year-old's body. Workers there apparently had no idea who he was until one of the women called the hospital later to give them some personal information. After launching an investigation, police uncovered the scheme and arrested Farello and Kasbaum. They have each now been charged with theft and gross abuse of a corpse. A third person was also allegedly involved in the incident, though it's unclear if they have yet been arrested. According to police, this is far from Farello and Kasbaum's first offense. Both of the women have lengthy criminal histories that include convictions for charges such as theft, soliciting, criminal trespass, receiving stolen property, possession of drug paraphernalia, and reckless assault. Authorities in Lee County, Florida say that a 22-year-old woman is facing charges this week following a bizarre incident in which she allegedly broke into her ex-boyfriend's home, destroyed a bunch of his stuff, and assaulted him with a bottle of soda. According to reports, the whole thing began on the night of March 1st when the Lee County Sheriff's Office received a call from the victim, who has not been identified by name. The man said that his ex-girlfriend, 22-year-old Akivia Reddick, had broken into his apartment using a hidden key outside and was now causing chaos inside. When a deputy arrived at the scene to investigate, he found the victim outside his apartment complex in the community of Lehigh Acres being chased by Reddick. The officer intervened, though not before the 22-year-old was captured in body cam footage throwing a 2-liter bottle of Sprite at him. According to the boyfriend, this wasn't the only food-related damage that Reddick had done either. He claimed that when she had broken in earlier and started breaking things, she had poured an entire jar of pickled pork on his couch. Reddick was arrested at the scene and has now been charged with battery, burglary, and criminal mischief. It's unclear why she was so angry at her ex.
Authorities in Jefferson County, Kentucky say that a 21-year-old man is facing charges after he recently tried to pull off a strange crime in which he attempted to pay for a luxury vehicle with a clearly fraudulent check at a car dealership, then became increasingly belligerent when employees refused to give him one. According to reports, the whole thing took place sometime in the middle of February when 21-year-old Connor Litka walked into Bluegrass Motorsport in the Louisville suburb of St. Matthews. Litka said that he was interested in purchasing a Porsche, and after pointing to a specific vehicle, pulled out his preferred method of payment, a clearly fraudulent check for $78 million. Understandably, the employees at the dealership weren't born yesterday, so they told the 21-year-old they weren't going to be selling him anything and asked him to leave. Seemingly unwilling to accept that his harebrained scheme wasn't going to work, Litka only became more aggressive at this point and reportedly walked to the dealership's parts department. He told workers there that he was, quote, looking for keys, and said he wasn't going to leave until he got his vehicle. Police were called, and Litka was arrested and later charged with criminal trespassing and disorderly conduct. Perhaps the most bizarre thing about the whole story, though, is that this apparently wasn't the first time the 21-year-old had done this. Literally the day before, he allegedly attempted a nearly identical stunt at a Land Rover dealership. The only difference was that that time, his check was only made out for $12 million. The owners of a New Jersey convenience store were left feeling rather salty this week, or should we say briny, after a man ruined an entire barrel of their deli pickles by inexplicably dunking his head inside of them. According to reports, the whole thing happened one day last week at a Heritage's dairy store in the town of Glassboro. An employee said that he was working at the register when he saw a young man enter the store. The next thing he knew, he heard a splash that he described as sounding like someone jumping into a pool. When he went to investigate, he saw the young man from before speed walking out of the business with his head dripping wet. There was also now pickle juice all over the floor. Piecing everything together, he realized what had happened. For some unknown reason, the man had dunked his head into the store's deli barrel of pickles. Understandably, this was unsanitary to say the least, meaning that the store had to throw out the whole barrel. They estimated that only a couple of pickles had been purchased at the time the barrel was opened, meaning that nearly the entire $52 barrel was wasted. The situation was reported to police, who put out a message about the bizarre crime to the public. In it, they said that they were seeking to identify the man responsible, writing, quote, "Sometimes there are no appropriate words for the actions one takes. This gentleman decided to walk into Heritage's and dunk his head in the large bin of pickles, which caused the store to have to remove them for sale. We are withholding the video since he was apparently videoing the incident himself with his cell phone, probably for likes, and we do not want to give him more attention than he deserves." Though the man's name was never released, apparently he did turn himself in the next day. It's unclear where the case will go from here, though police thanked the public for their help in an updated post that read, quote, "We certainly relish the community's help in bringing attention to the pickle we were in yesterday." If you thought this week's crime stories couldn't get any stranger, well, we've got something to round out today's extended edition that we would argue tops them all. Seriously, this dude makes Pickle Guy look like a downright responsible member of society. Even weirder, it's not so much what he did, it's his name. Police in Green Bay, Wisconsin say that a routine call took a surprising turn this week when they responded to a domestic dispute, only to find that their suspect had a rather unique first name. According to reports, it all started on the night of March 5th, when officers were called to a residence on East Walnut Street. They arrived to find a very drunk and very combative 42-year-old man who had allegedly assaulted his daughter and her boyfriend, who also lived there. Apparently, the 42-year-old became angry that his daughter wasn't doing household chores and taking care of their puppies, and after having too much alcohol, had flown into a drunken and shirtless rage, one in which he allegedly punched and shoved the victims, and at one point also waved around a BB gun. Thankfully, police were able to de-escalate the situation and place the 42-year-old under arrest, at which point they learned his identity. Legally, the father's name was D's Nuts. D's Nuts Kroll, to be more specific. Apparently, the 42-year-old was born Derek Kroll, but for some unknown reason had it changed in 2011. Well, actually, first his name was Des Nuts because he misspelled it. He had it corrected to D's Nuts officially in 2017. The whole thing led to this gem of a line in this week's police report. Quote, "D's Nuts appeared to be highly intoxicated." The 42-year-old is now facing misdemeanor charges of battery and disorderly conduct and was released the following day after posting $1,000 bond. Representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Georgia say that a pair of men have been officially charged this week, more than a year after they allegedly blew up part of a woman's home as part of an unhinged plot after she rejected one of them that she had met through an online dating app. The whole thing apparently started sometime in late 2022 when the female victim, who has not been identified by name, met 37-year-old Stephen Glosser through an online dating app. The pair reportedly exchanged messages, though according to reports, nothing serious ever materialized, and the situation ended with both of them blocking each other. To the woman, it apparently seemed like that was it. However, unbeknownst to her, Glosser was allegedly plotting his revenge over being rejected. Between December of 2022 and January of 2023, Glosser and his roommate, 34-year-old Caleb Kinsey, reportedly began stalking the female victim after figuring out her personal information online. It's now alleged that over this time they also started putting together a plan. The details of this unhinged plan apparently changed over time, though at one point it reportedly included shooting arrows into the victim's front door, mailing her dead rats and dog feces, scalping her, and buying a large python, which they planned to release into her home to eat her young daughter. According to investigators, the men eventually settled on something else though, blowing up the woman's house. After making a homemade bomb, Glosser and Kinsey allegedly took it to the victim's home where they detonated it in the early morning hours of January 13th, 2023. Thankfully though, no one was injured. The property, which was located in the city of Richmond Hill, was brand new at the time, and the victim and her family were still in the process of moving in. Still, extensive damage from the blast was done to the property, mostly in the garage, and the house was said to be the victim's dream home. Glosser and Kinsey were eventually tied to the crime after a vehicle belonging to Kinsey was reportedly seen by a witness fleeing the scene after the bombing. Investigators with the ATF say that evidence was also recovered of the men purchasing explosives which were allegedly used to make the device. At the time of this recording, both men are now in custody and are facing a number of charges. These include stalking, use of an explosive to commit another felony offense, conspiracy to use an explosive to commit a felony, and possession of an unregistered destructive device.
Authorities in Des Moines County, Iowa, say that they arrested and charged a self-described witch after she allegedly lit the porch of a stranger's house on fire, believing that the place belonged to a friend. The whole thing started at around 4:30 p.m. on March 19th when police and firefighters in the city of Burlington were called to a home on Vineyard Street. Emergency responders arrived to find a fire which was burning on the front porch of the residence, which thankfully was able to be put out relatively quickly. Once the fire was extinguished, police spoke with the homeowner, who said that she had been alerted to the strange situation after security cameras at the property picked up motion outside. Moments later, she saw a woman she didn't recognize burning a bizarre assortment of items on her porch, at which point she called for help. The alleged firebug in question, 46-year-old Michelle Young, was still at the scene when police and firefighters arrived and apparently offered a strange confession when questioned. She told police that she had been walking around in the area for about 2 hours that afternoon, picking up items as she went, including articles of clothing, tinfoil, bark, and a yellow lawn flag. She was carrying this collection of garbage around when she spotted a sign at a nearby house that read, quote, "Witches Welcome." Young explained that she was, in fact, a witch, and decided to check out the residence because she also claimed that she knew the person that lived there. After knocking at the door 3 times and receiving no answer, she smoked a cigarette before trying the door once more. She said that's when she made a pile out of the garbage she'd collected, setting it on fire when she was finished. However, she stated she didn't want to hurt anyone and never planned for the fire to get out of hand. Upon finishing her bizarre story, Young was placed under arrest. She was later charged with reckless use of fire and possession of drug paraphernalia after a glass drug pipe was also found on her person.
Representatives from Florida's Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office released a wild bit of police body cam footage this week after a woman was found passed out and allegedly drunk behind the wheel of her vehicle while sitting at a red light following a night out celebrating St. Patrick's Day. The whole thing reportedly began just before 3 a.m. on March 18th when a female officer on patrol stopped at a red light at an intersection in Tampa. When the light turned green, she noticed that a car nearby wasn't moving, and when she got out to investigate, she quickly realized why. The woman behind the wheel, later identified as 27-year-old Keontae Carter, was allegedly passed out at the wheel. In video footage released by the department this week, the female officer can be seen trying to wake up Carter, who appears to be out cold. The officer moves from tapping the 27-year-old on the shoulder to nudging her, though this also seems to do very little, as Carter flops back and forth with her head inadvertently honking the car's horn multiple times. While the officer was eventually successful in getting Carter to wake up, things only got more incriminating for the 27-year-old from here. Sporting green hair and dressed in an Irish XL drinking team shirt, she admits she doesn't know where she is coming from or even what town she's in. When asked what road Carter thinks she's on, she replies, "The brown one." Despite her lack of ability to answer any basic questions, I will say that when it came to the field sobriety test, Carter was able to walk a frighteningly straight line. All jokes aside, thankfully no one was injured as a result of this situation, as it's easy to see how things could have turned out a lot worse. Carter was arrested at the scene and is now facing charges of driving under the influence.
A fed-up New York City man finally got his revenge this week after he was victimized dozens of times by porch pirates, and he decided to take matters into his own hands by setting a trap. According to reports, it all started on March 27th when Carlos Mejia had a $250 pair of Air Jordans stolen from outside his home in Queens' Richmond Hill neighborhood. An unknown porch pirate who was traveling in a Honda CR-V was apparently following the delivery driver and took the package almost immediately after it was delivered. Now, Carlos was no stranger to porch pirates before this. In total, he estimates he's had more than 100 packages taken this way, many of them containing expensive shoes that were supposed to be part of his sneaker collection. However, something about this incident in particular broke him. He saw the thief over his doorbell camera in the act, and though he pleaded with him over his intercom to not take the package, the thief ignored him. All Carlos could do was watch helplessly over his phone since he was at work at the time. That was when he decided enough was enough. A few days later, the 35-year-old came up with an idea. He created a decoy package, put it on his doorstep, and waited for the thief to return. Inside the parcel was a disgusting surprise: some dog poop and a soiled pee pad courtesy of his English bulldog Hazel, as well as a note that read in part, quote, "F you." It turned out Carlos didn't have to wait very long, as a man quickly showed up and stuffed the stomach-churning package into his backpack. To Carlos's surprise, though, it was a different thief than the man in the Honda who had recently been victimizing him. Apparently deciding he would save the poop package for another day, Carlos ran outside with a bat and confronted the thief in the act. The terrified man, later identified as 36-year-old Victor Stazone, tried to offer a lame excuse, but Carlos wasn't buying it. He forced the 36-year-old to remain at the scene until police could arrive. While Stazone has now been charged with petty larceny, criminal possession of stolen property, and criminal trespass charges, it appears that Carlos is still waiting for his opportunity to get the unknown thief in the Honda. He may get his chance sooner rather than later, as Carlos claims he's been driving around the neighborhood recently. An Oklahoma woman reportedly made a true April Fool of herself last week when she was caught red-handed behind the wheel of a stolen vehicle, then gave police a hilariously ridiculous excuse to try and explain the situation. The whole thing started just before 4 p.m. on April 1st when Tulsa police received an alert about a stolen white SUV being driven in the area. They managed to track the vehicle, conducting a traffic stop a short time later. When officers spoke with the driver, later identified as 53-year-old Angela Harrison, she claimed that she had no idea the SUV was stolen. She said that about an hour earlier she had been at a gas station when she ran into a customer at the Waffle House where she used to work. The customer remembered that her birthday was coming up and wanted to give her a present as a final tip. That present was $10 cash. Oh yeah, and the keys to a white Jeep Liberty. Understandably, police did not buy this ridiculous story, especially since the SUV in question had been reported stolen before Christmas. Authorities had surveillance footage of Harrison driving the vehicle from January 14th, meaning that she couldn't possibly have gotten it just an hour earlier. When confronted with this evidence, Harrison admitted that it was her in the surveillance footage, but still bizarrely tried to claim that she was telling the truth. She was later charged with possession of a stolen vehicle. Authorities in Holmes County, Florida say that a Georgia woman is facing a number of charges this week after she allegedly went on a terrifying shooting spree on a local section of a highway, then blamed the solar eclipse for her actions. According to reports, as people across North America were preparing for the rare astronomical event on April 8th, Talon Nichelle Celestine was in a very different headspace. The 22-year-old, who's from Georgia, apparently believed that God was speaking to her and that he wanted her to carry out an act of violence in connection with the eclipse. After checking out of a hotel in Holmes County that afternoon, Celestine drove her purple Dodge Challenger onto Interstate 10. It was there, while traveling westbound near mile marker 112, that she allegedly began shooting at other vehicles. The first victim to be targeted was a man whose car was struck by multiple bullets. One of these grazed his arm, while others caused glass to go flying everywhere. Fortunately, though, the man was able to pull over and escape further injury. The second victim wasn't so lucky. They were shot in the neck and had to be rushed to a local hospital. Their condition is currently unknown. Celestine was arrested a short time later after leaving a rest area near mile marker 96. Inside her vehicle, police found a 9mm handgun and a rifle. She went on to tell police that she had committed the attacks because of the solar eclipse, a story which she allegedly also told to employees at the hotel where she was staying. Those employees called 911, which is how authorities were able to locate the 22-year-old so quickly. At the time of this recording, Celestine remains in custody. She's facing charges including attempted murder, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and improper discharge of a firearm.
An idiotic Florida man is reportedly in hot water this week after he was accused of pulling out a knife and threatening a child who was riding a bike near him, later claiming he did so because he feared for his life. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on the afternoon of April 8th when police were called to a residence in the city of Winter Springs. They were contacted by the parents of a young boy who said that their child had just been threatened with a weapon. When officers arrived, they spoke to the terrified boy, who explained what had happened. He said that he had been riding his bike home when he was stopped by a man he didn't know. The man got angry at him because he was riding on the sidewalk rather than in the bike lane, and proceeded to pull out a large military-style knife which he pointed at him. Not knowing what to do, the child apologized and got home as quickly as he could. While conducting a search of the area, police came across 73-year-old Richard Schaefer, who was found to be in possession of a knife exactly like the one the young victim had described. He was also carrying a handgun. When asked if he had pulled the knife on the child, Schaefer admitted that he had, though claimed that he did so because he thought his life was in danger. I'm not kidding. He literally tried to use the "he was coming right at me" defense. As you might imagine, Schaefer was arrested for this unhinged behavior and was later charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody.
A Texas man was reportedly foiled by a bit of well-deserved instant karma this week when he was allegedly caught impersonating a police officer after unwittingly attempting to pull over a pair of real deputies. The whole thing began sometime on April 13th when a pair of Harris County deputies were undercover while working a racing event in Houston's Memorial area. The deputies were driving around when suddenly they saw a white Hyundai Santa Fe behind them. The vehicle was equipped with red and blue flashing lights and was clearly trying to pull them over. Of course, being that they were real deputies, the undercover officers immediately realized that something was off. The Santa Fe did not appear to be a legitimate Harris County police vehicle. They immediately notified the sheriff's office, who sent marked units to investigate. As soon as the marked units showed up, the driver of the Santa Fe, later identified as Sean Arnold, allegedly attempted to flee the scene. He was quickly stopped, at which point things got even more interesting. Not only was Arnold dressed in a uniform shirt, he was wearing a bulletproof vest, a body-worn camera, and had a security badge. He was also carrying a BB gun, taser, police radios, and other equipment which were clearly supposed to make him look like a real officer. He was placed under arrest and charged with impersonating a police officer and being a felon in possession of body armor. According to reports, this is far from Arnold's first similar offense. He has multiple arrests for impersonating officers in Texas, Illinois, and Missouri, and also has convictions for several offenses including theft of motor vehicles. Because of the circumstances, Harris County authorities say that it's likely there are other people that Arnold may have victimized or attempted to victimize while pretending to be an officer. They are now urging anyone who might have had such interactions with him to please come forward.
A Florida bus driver's bizarre revenge plot reportedly landed him in hot water this week after he allegedly tried to get back at a fellow guest at the hotel where he was staying, but instead caused the entire building to be evacuated. The whole thing started sometime on the night of April 12th when employees at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites in the city of DeLand contacted local authorities about an alarming situation that was happening there. Multiple guests were complaining of an acid or gas-like smell coming from the hotel's second floor. The substance was powerful enough that it was causing people to cough, and a few were even having difficulty breathing. When emergency responders arrived at the scene, more than 100 guests were evacuated so that a proper sweep of the hotel could be conducted. Fortunately, no hazardous gas was found in the air. However, firefighters did discover something else, a mysterious orange chemical that had stained parts of the walls on the second floor. It turned out to be pepper spray. After reviewing surveillance footage from the hotel, authorities were quickly able to discover what had happened. They watched as a man wearing a black hat, polo shirt, and pants walked into the hallway where the smell had first been noticed and began to spray the walls and floors with something inside of a canister. Employees immediately recognized this man as a bus driver who had been staying at the hotel with a baseball team. He was identified as 59-year-old Daniel Young. When police found Young, he was sitting in the parking lot behind the wheel of his charter bus, allegedly wearing the same clothes as the man in the video footage. He allegedly admitted to pepper spraying the hallway of the second floor of the hotel, though proceeded to offer a bizarre excuse for his actions. The 59-year-old explained that he had been staying at the Holiday Inn for about a month, and that throughout this time, the guest in the room above him had been making a lot of noise. This had interfered with his sleep, and he complained to employees, but said that the situation continued. That night, he had decided to take matters into his own hands. He said he used the pepper spray, hoping, quote, it would cause irritation to the second-floor guest and stop the noise above his room. Afterwards, he threw the pepper spray canister away behind the building, where it was later recovered by police. Young was arrested following his confession and charged with criminal mischief and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. According to reports, the hotel had to be evacuated for over 2 hours because of the whole ordeal, and at least one person was hospitalized due to their exposure to the pepper spray.
An affidavit was released to the public that looks pretty embarrassing for one Indiana woman this week. One that reveals that she was recently charged after she tried to report her drug dealer to police because of a suspicious batch of meth she bought. According to the probable cause affidavit, the whole thing started sometime on January 10, 2024, when dispatchers with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office received 2 911 calls in relatively quick succession. Both calls came from the same address in the city of Bedford. However, no one answered when 911 operators attempted to speak with the caller. In order to make sure everything was okay, police were sent to the home in question, where they eventually met with one of the residents there, 34-year-old Sarah Harris. She not only admitted to making the calls, she soon revealed the bizarre reason why. The 34-year-old said she bought a bad batch of meth and she wanted to turn in her dealer. Harris went on to explain that the previous day, she went to an acquaintance's house where she smoked what she described as a normal bowl of methamphetamine. However, after purchasing more and taking it home, she snorted some of it only to find it made her feel weird. The 34-year-old stated that she, quote, noticed something different when it touched her skin and nostrils. She said she felt she needed to stand up or she was going to have a heart attack. This had lasted for several hours. Harris was angry because she felt like the meth she bought wasn't what it was supposed to be, and she now said she wanted to press charges against her dealer. When asked if she still had any of the drugs left, Harris apparently turned over a small baggie of the crystalline substance. Police tested it, and afterwards had some good and bad news for the 34-year-old. The good news was that the bag Harris bought really did contain methamphetamine. The bad news was that the bag that Harris bought really did contain methamphetamine, meaning that she had now confessed to purchasing and using illegal drugs. Harris was arrested and has since been charged with possession. Apparently, she has a list of previous convictions which include more possession offenses, as well as theft, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, resisting, and operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated.
Representatives from the Florida Highway Patrol say that a 27-year-old woman is facing a number of charges this week after she led troopers on a high-speed chase, then offered a ridiculous excuse after she was finally caught. The whole thing started sometime on April 14th when a Florida Highway Patrol trooper clocked a vehicle going nearly 50 miles over the speed limit in Sumter County. The car, which was being driven by 27-year-old Wanisha Toombs, was captured by the trooper's radar gun going 117 miles per hour in a 70 zone on State Road 91. The trooper activated their lights and siren and began following Toombs. However, the 27-year-old gave no indication of slowing down. Instead, the trooper thought that they could see her talking on a cell phone. The chase continued for some time, with Toombs allegedly hitting speeds of at least 120 miles per hour. It was only after 3 attempted pit maneuvers that the trooper was finally able to successfully stop Toombs, who was arrested immediately afterwards. Upon being taken into custody, the 27-year-old gave a wild excuse for her actions. According to her, she didn't know that the police were trying to pull her over. However, an examination of the 27-year-old's driving history produced a much more plausible alternative. She had unpaid traffic tickets in Miami-Dade County going back to 2021 and also had a suspended license. Toombs was charged with reckless driving, driving with a suspended license, and fleeing with disregard of safety. Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a 32-year-old man is facing charges this week after he allegedly broke into a house and stole one of the residents' pets, later offering a strange excuse for his actions. According to reports, the whole thing began just before 4:20 in the morning on April 15th, when homeowner Ty Pham awoke to an incredibly alarming situation. A stranger had broken in through the back door of his house and was in the middle of stealing one of his 2 dogs. Ty shouted at the man and asked what the hell he was doing, to which the suspect replied that it was his dog. He then fled the scene, taking the animal with him. Officers quickly caught up with the suspect, later identified as 32-year-old Janang Morena, as he was walking close to the crime scene about 15 minutes later. When they asked him about the burglary that had just happened, he gave an incredibly strange excuse. Morena claimed that his black pit bull had been stolen in South Daytona, so he had started walking around looking for it. He had done so until he came across Tai Pham's house, where he heard a dog barking inside. For some reason, he assumed that it was his dog, so he broke in. Of course, this didn't make sense for a lot of reasons, but perhaps the most glaring one was that Tai Pham didn't own a black pit bull. He owned 2 Labradors, a black one and a yellow one. Making the situation even more ridiculous, Morena allegedly stole the yellow one. The 32-year-old was arrested and charged with burglary of an occupied dwelling, as well as providing a false name to law enforcement. At the time he was taken into custody, Morena allegedly had a warrant out for reckless driving. Authorities in Baltimore County, Maryland announced a major development in a truly wild case this week, revealing that they had arrested the athletic director of a local high school months after he allegedly tried to frame the school's principal with an incendiary AI-generated audio recording. The whole situation began on January 16th of this year, when several faculty members at Pikesville High School received an email that had been sent from an anonymous address. The message contained an attached audio recording that purported to be a secretly recorded clip of the school's principal, Eric Eiswert. In the clip, Eiswert appeared to be ranting about faculty members and students at the school. These remarks were not only disparaging, but contained racist and anti-Semitic language. In one bit, the voice in the recording states that the black students at Pikesville, quote, couldn't test their way out of a paper bag. The audio recording was reportedly leaked across social media by some of those who received it, where, as you might imagine, it quickly garnered a ton of attention. The high school was inundated with calls and complaints from parents and concerned community members. Online, Eiswert received threats of violence. One person allegedly told the principal, quote, "The world would be a better place if you were on the other side of the dirt." Eiswert was put on administrative leave pending an investigation. There was just one problem. The audio that started the whole thing was fake. Not only that, it's now alleged that it was deliberately created by a disgruntled faculty member at the school who was trying to destroy Eiswert's reputation. Though the principal claimed from the beginning that he had never said any of the stuff that was in the audio file, it wasn't until this week that he was finally vindicated. After months of analysis by multiple sources, investigators announced that the audio clip had been fabricated using audio software that employed the use of artificial intelligence. The reason behind the creation of the fake audio is nearly as shocking as the clip itself. According to police, it was made by the disgruntled athletic director at Pikesville, 31-year-old Dazan Darian. Specifically, authorities allege that Darian came up with the scheme near the end of 2023 when he learned that Eiswert was investigating him for misappropriating school funds. According to reports, Darian paid his roommate $1,900 for helping to coach a girls' soccer team that he, in fact, never coached. Due to this and other previous incidents, Darian knew his days at the school were numbered, so he allegedly created the fake audio clip and circulated it to discredit the principal. Police say that during their investigation, they not only uncovered ample evidence that the clip had been fabricated, they were also able to link Darian to the account that had sent the initial email. Darian was arrested at the Baltimore-Washington International Airport on April 25th as he was trying to board a flight to Houston. He is now facing charges including theft, stalking, retaliating against a witness, and disturbing the operation of a school.
A 33-year-old Florida man apparently had police shaking their heads this week after he was identified as a suspect in a theft case and he tried to avoid detection by putting on a rather obvious disguise. According to reports, the whole thing took place just after 3 p.m. on April 24th when officers from the Glades County Sheriff's Office were investigating a stolen boat. After successfully locating the boat in the old Calusa Lodge area of Lakeport, they had come up with a suspect in the case, a 33-year-old man named Joshua Kolotka. They were in the middle of searching for Kolotka when they spotted something, or rather someone, who caught their attention. As officers were looking around the area, a person exited a nearby residence and started walking away. It turned out to be Kolotka, who was clearly trying to disguise himself as a woman. He was wearing a blonde wig, a blue feather-patterned dress, a white cardigan, and perhaps most conspicuously of all, a pair of large sunglasses. Understandably, the getup did not fool officers, who quickly placed Kolotka under arrest. The 33-year-old is now facing multiple theft charges for the stolen boat, as well as a John Deere Gator utility vehicle. Police say that Kolotka already had warrants out at the time he was taken into custody, and that more possibly stolen items were found at the scene. Glades County authorities say that they are now working with their counterparts in Seminole County, and that more charges may follow.
Representatives from Florida's Pinellas County Sheriff's Office say that a 46-year-old man is facing charges this week after he allegedly flew off the handle during the middle of a road rage incident and pelted another driver with pasta and sauce. The whole thing reportedly unfolded at around 9 p.m. on April 25th, when the suspect, 46-year-old Nolan Goines, was traveling in a vehicle near his home in the city of St. Petersburg. He was heading down Park Street near Bay Pines Boulevard when he became frustrated by another driver's, quote, glaring headlights. Apparently, this was enough to turn him into a bit of a spicy meatball, if you will. After pulling up beside the other driver, Goines allegedly grabbed some pasta and sauce he had with him and flung it out his passenger window and into the open driver's side window of the other vehicle. The victim was apparently splattered with the messy food on his arms, legs, and torso, at which point Goines drove off. Unfortunately for the 46-year-old, his half-baked, or should I say al dente reaction, quickly came back to bite him. When police caught up with him a short time later, he had an identical sauce stain on his right sleeve to the ones on the victim's clothing. He was arrested and is now facing a charge of misdemeanor battery. Apparently, the 46-year-old already has a rap sheet that includes previous battery charges, though unfortunately reports do not state whether these were also pasta-related. If the assault in that last story wasn't weird enough for you, apparently another Florida man also tried his hand at some unorthodox weaponry last week when he allegedly attacked a police officer with a cheeseburger. According to reports, the incident began just before 10 p.m. on April 30th, when police in the city of Fort Pierce were called to a Wawa convenience store on South Kings Highway. The caller, an employee at the business, told police that a man was trespassing there and had already been in trouble for doing so before. He was identified as 73-year-old Joseph Delancey. When officers arrived at the scene, Delancey was still there and was placed in handcuffs. At the time, he was apparently holding half a cheeseburger, which he refused to drop despite several commands. Perhaps in a last desperate bid for freedom, Delancey eventually threw the burger at one of the officers as they attempted to walk him to a patrol vehicle. The officer was struck in the head and was killed instantly. Nah, I'm just kidding. It was a cheeseburger. It hit him in the leg and left behind a bit of a mess, but otherwise, it was pretty stupid. Unfortunately for Delancey, though, assault with a burger is still assault, and in addition to misdemeanor trespassing, he is now facing felony battery on a law enforcement officer. The 73-year-old apparently has a lengthy criminal history, including convictions for attempted murder, fraud, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. He was also previously arrested for attacking a police officer, though that time he used a metal pole, which I assume was a more effective weapon. A 26-year-old New York man is looking at some serious prison time this week, months after he allegedly set fire to the childhood home of a state trooper, an unhinged attack that was apparently motivated by some traffic tickets. The whole thing started sometime on the evening of December 20th, 2023, when the suspect, 26-year-old Tyler Williams, was pulled over by the unidentified state trooper while driving in Orange County. It's unclear exactly what prompted the traffic stop, though the situation ended with Williams being issued multiple tickets. Several hours later, in the early morning hours of December 21st, emergency responders were called to a nearby residence in the village of Warwick with reports of a fire. They arrived to find a house engulfed in flames. The property belonged to the father of that same state trooper who had given Williams the tickets. Thankfully, all 3 people inside at the time had been able to escape without injury. However, the place had sustained serious damage. It also quickly became clear that the fire had been set intentionally. 5 months and nearly 24 search warrants later, Orange County investigators were able to link the 2 December incidents. Specifically, they now allege that after being ticketed, Williams began looking up personal information related to the state trooper who had conducted the traffic stop. Though it appears he wasn't able to find his current address, he was able to find the location of the man's childhood home. A few hours later, he allegedly showed up there and set the house on fire. Williams was arrested on May 15th and is now facing a charge of arson in the 2nd degree. If convicted, he could be facing between 5 and 25 years in prison. A Florida vacation reportedly came to an abrupt end for 2 Missouri women last week when they got into a fist fight inside of a home and had to be separated by police. A fight that was apparently triggered by a disagreement over Disney World tickets. The whole thing started at around 11:20 a.m. on May 6th when police in the city of Wildwood were called to an address on the 5900 block of Roundel Way. They arrived to find 2 women, later identified as 31-year-old Catherine Northrup and 28-year-old Gina Danforth, who were in the middle of a violent altercation. The women were apparently going at it so hard that officers had to physically separate them, even after which Northrup continued to be belligerent. Danforth was hardly blameless herself, though. She quickly admitted to hitting the 31-year-old, who had scratches on her neck, elbow, and stomach. Apparently, there were several people present who witnessed the fight. However, according to police, none of them were reliable. Instead, after getting everyone's statements, they had to kind of piece together their own theory as to what had happened. The exact circumstances of the altercation still aren't clear, though it appears that the problems between Northrup and Danforth began with an argument over tickets to Disney World and a golf cart. Northrup further claimed that Danforth got in her face and started spitting, and that she had initially tried to remove herself from the situation, but was grabbed by her hair and pinned down. Both women were subsequently taken to a local hospital, Northrup so that she could be treated for injuries, and Danforth because she said she wasn't feeling well. Afterwards, they were both arrested and charged with battery and have since been released after posting a $1,000 bond. In case you're wondering, it's unclear if either woman got to go to Disney. Authorities in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, say that a local man is facing charges in connection with an equally bizarre and revolting crime this week after he allegedly splattered his brother with the contents of his adult diaper during the middle of an argument. The situation began just before 2 a.m. on May 14th, when St. Petersburg police were called to a residence on the 5500 block of 22nd Avenue North with reports of a domestic incident. They arrived to find a strange and stomach-churning scene. On the porch of the home were the remnants of a soiled adult diaper. The contents of that diaper appeared to be strewn about and were partially on the shirt of one of the residents there. The man with the dirty t-shirt explained that a short time earlier he had gotten into an argument with his 18-year-old brother, Damian Caston. It's unclear exactly what this argument was about, but it quickly escalated. Though Caston is reportedly paralyzed from the waist down, that didn't stop him from wreaking havoc. Using his arms to move around, the 18-year-old allegedly began damaging walls inside the house, after which he started throwing things at his brother and another person who was there. Deciding that things were spiraling out of control, the brother and the other witness had picked Caston up at some point and had carried him outside to prevent him from doing further damage. That's when the 18-year-old apparently resorted to hurling the only thing he had left. You might say that he was casting diapers. Anyway, the soiled diaper apparently hit the brother in the chest, leading to the gross situation that police observed when they arrived. Caston was arrested at the scene and has now been charged with domestic battery. He was also ordered to have no contact with his brother. In case you haven't already gotten your fill of toilet-themed crime news, we decided to close out this week's extended edition with another truly gross story, this one courtesy of the great state of New Hampshire. Authorities in the city of Manchester, New Hampshire say that an 18-year-old man is facing charges this week following an unhinged and stomach-churning attack against a young mother and child. According to reports, the whole thing began sometime on May 8th when the mother was enjoying the day at Dairyfield Park with her 4-year-old daughter. At some point, the little girl needed to go to the bathroom, so her mother took her to a nearby porta potty. That's when they apparently caught the attention of 18-year-old Aidan Studer. While it's unclear exactly how the interaction started, Studer began arguing with the mother when she took her daughter over to the portable toilet. As the woman tried to get on with her day and accompanied the girl inside to go to the bathroom, Studer allegedly pushed the porta potty over onto the ground, with both of them inside. Not only were the mother and daughter sickeningly covered with urine and feces as a result, but Studer apparently made sure to push the toilet over so that it landed on its door, effectively trapping them inside. Thankfully, some good Samaritans were quick to come by and help them get to safety. Understandably, the mother quickly called police, who arrived at the scene and confirmed what had happened with witnesses. Studer was placed under arrest, though not before apparently making the situation worse for himself by throwing something at one of the officers. The 18-year-old is now facing 2 counts of criminal restraint, 1 count of criminal mischief, and simple assault on a police officer.
Authorities in Marion County, Florida say that an accused car thief made quite the interesting decision recently after he allegedly stole a vehicle belonging to a local woman, then called her to tell her what he had done. According to reports, the crime took place sometime recently when Marion County police received a call from a woman in the city of Ocala. The woman explained that she had just had her car stolen, but that weirdly afterwards the suspected perpetrator, 32-year-old Marquise Nance, had phoned her to tell her about the crime. Specifically, he said that he had left the vehicle at a Winn-Dixie supermarket at the local Marion Oaks shopping center. When officers responded to the scene, they found the woman's stolen car along with Nance. Apparently, he was in a less honest mood at this point because when questioned about the situation, he claimed that he hadn't stolen anything. Luckily, police were able to recover surveillance video from the area that showed him driving and exiting the vehicle. Nance was arrested and is now facing multiple charges, including grand theft of a motor vehicle. In a recent video posted by the Marion County Sheriff's Office, one of their officers, Lieutenant Paul Bloom, joked that it was kind of Nance that he told the victim he had stolen her car. A 31-year-old Florida man may not be much of a criminal mastermind, but he might want to look into a career as a contortionist after he recently amazed police by managing to squeeze himself into a tiny space inside a household appliance in a desperate bid to avoid arrest. According to reports, the whole thing started on May 17th when Escambia County Police received a tip about the location of 31-year-old David Jerome Jackson. Jackson was wanted on charges of firing a gun into a dwelling, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, damage to property, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon for an incident that happened 2 months earlier. After learning that Jackson might be at a home on Edgewater Drive in the city of Pensacola, officers arrived at the property to have a look around. Initially, it looked like the tip had been a bust. That was until police went into the home's laundry room. There, tightly nestled in the drum of a front-loading dryer, was the fugitive 31-year-old. To say that the situation both baffled and amused police is definitely an understatement. They had no idea how Jackson had managed to make his way inside the appliance, referring to the opening as, quote, remarkably small. Nonetheless, the 31-year-old was removed, albeit with considerable help, and taken into custody. In a post released by the sheriff's office after the incident, they joked about what they referred to as Jackson's, quote, tumble-ready hideout. They also reminded the public that all suspects are presumed innocent and, quote, free of static cling until proven otherwise in a court of law.
Authorities in Lyon County, Iowa say that a man was recently busted in connection with a bizarre DUI case, one in which he apparently attempted to use a fake ID containing a rather ridiculous oversight. The whole thing began sometime on May 12th when an officer in the city of Rock Rapids spotted a 2016 Ford Fusion that was driving erratically. The vehicle was all over the road and posed a danger to other motorists, so eventually police pulled the car over. When an officer approached the vehicle, they came face to face with the driver, later identified as 33-year-old Joe Vaida. Vaida was wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy and rainy outside, and his breath reportedly smelled of alcohol. It wasn't hard to pinpoint why. There was an open can of beer in the center console of the vehicle, and more alcohol in the back seat. Unsurprisingly, the 33-year-old failed a breathalyzer test and was also found to be in possession of methamphetamine. At this point, Vaida was well and truly busted, but in an apparent last-ditch effort not to be identified, he handed the officer who pulled him over a fake Minnesota state ID card. Unfortunately, the card was about as convincing as Vaida's driving. What gave it away, you ask? Well, for starters, it listed him as being 8 feet tall. Vaida is apparently 5 foot 8 inches. The 33-year-old was arrested and is now facing several charges, including narcotics possession, operating a vehicle while intoxicated, and providing cops with a false ID. At the time of his arrest, he was also apparently wanted in another Iowa county for failure to appear in court on an earlier DUI charge. It's unclear if he pretended to be 8 feet tall in that case as well. Representatives from the Florida Highway Patrol released wild footage of a recent car chase last week after a 27-year-old woman allegedly stole a vehicle during a test drive and then tried to flee from authorities. According to reports, the whole thing began sometime on May 9th, when 27-year-old Melina Logan showed up at the Honda dealership located on South Miami's South Dixie Highway. After asking to test drive a new 2024 Honda Civic, Logan was allowed to briefly go out in the vehicle. However, things took a serious turn when she got back. As soon as the salesperson who was accompanying her stepped out of the car, she drove off. The stolen vehicle was reported to Miami-Dade police, who in turn notified additional members of law enforcement. Before long, Logan was spotted again, this time by a Florida Highway Patrol trooper as she was near the intersection of State Road 826 and Northwest 74th Street. The trooper attempted to conduct a traffic stop, but Logan refused to pull over, instead continuing to pick up speed on the busy highway. She proceeded to weave dangerously in and out of traffic at speeds of up to 90 miles per hour, eventually pulling onto the paved shoulder of the road when traffic became too heavy. As Logan raced down the narrow shoulder, she allegedly struck several victims before finally immobilizing the vehicle on a concrete barrier. Even at this point, though, she refused to give up, jumping off the exit ramp she was on into a canal below. In dashcam footage recorded by the pursuing trooper, several officers can be seen trying to rescue Logan from the water. The 27-year-old reportedly refused to grab safety ropes that were thrown to her, forcing police to ultimately go into the canal and pull her out. Logan was arrested at the scene and is now facing several charges, including grand theft, aggravated fleeing and eluding, resisting an officer without violence, and leaving the scene of a crash involving an injury. A 24-year-old California content creator is in hot water this week after he was slapped with federal charges over a YouTube video he made last year, one that authorities say contains highly dangerous and illegal stunts. According to a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California, Sukmin Choi, better known by his YouTuber name Alex Choi, was arrested on June 5th after he was charged with one count of causing the placement of an explosive or incendiary device on an aircraft. The charges relate to a video the 24-year-old made and released in July of 2023, in which fireworks were shot from a helicopter to destroy a Lamborghini. The video, which was fittingly titled "Destroying a Lamborghini with Fireworks," reportedly shows the supercar racing around the desert somewhere in San Bernardino County, while a helicopter flies low overhead and a barrage of pyrotechnics are shot at it from above. Though it has since been taken down from YouTube, in the video, Choi can apparently be seen speaking at length about how he created and shot the footage. He can also be seen pressing a button that says "Fire Missiles," after which the fireworks begin raining down on the vehicle. There are several problems with what Choi did, according to officials. For starters, he didn't have the relevant permits for his video shoot, and allegedly purchased the fireworks in Nevada because they are illegal in California. The biggest issue, though, is the fact that the fireworks were strapped to the helicopter. Apparently, this is considered mounting a weapon on an aircraft. The charge Choi is facing is no joke either. According to reports, if convicted, he could be looking at up to 10 years in federal prison. At the time of this recording, Choi has been released on $50,000 bond. The case is expected to resume early next month. A 33-year-old Florida man may not win any awards for his comedic originality. However, he did manage to land himself on the receiving end of some pretty hilarious instant karma this week, when he jokingly told officers that his name was Mr. Monopoly during the middle of an investigation, and he ended up going straight to jail. The whole thing started sometime on the evening of June 1st, when police in the city of St. Petersburg received a call about some possible vandalism in progress. Callers said that they had seen a man spray painting a building at the intersection of 54th Avenue and 41st Street South. After responding to the scene, officers managed to find a man in the area matching the description that witnesses had provided. He reportedly had a bag slung over his shoulder, inside of which there were a number of cans of spray paint in plain sight. Police asked the man to identify himself. However, he refused to answer. That was until he was placed under arrest. After being put in the back of a patrol car, the suspect said that his name was Mr. Monopoly and claimed his date of birth was 4/20/69. What a brilliant comedic mind, am I right? Anyway, the joke was on him because almost immediately after this, police found his driver's license. It identified him as 33-year-old Ryan Howard. Not only was Howard taken straight to jail without passing go or collecting $200, he is now facing charges of criminal mischief and resisting for providing a fake name. Unfortunately for Mr. Monopoly, he also won't be able to secure his release by rolling doubles or paying $50 in Parker Brothers money. His bond was set at 1,000 real American dollars. Authorities in Travis County, Texas, say that a car theft case took a strange and somewhat amusing turn last week when police arrested their suspect only to discover he had quite the unusual name. It all started sometime on June 4th when police spotted a vehicle driving on Congress Avenue near Radham Lane in Austin. The vehicle stopped at a commercial address that officers recognized as being a known hub for criminal activity, specifically as a place where stolen cars had previously been recovered. Sure enough, when they ran the vehicle's plates, they discovered that it had been stolen the day before, and they arrested the 37-year-old man behind the wheel. While all of this was pretty standard, that changed when police got a look at the man's identification. His legal name was Optimus Prime Blakely. Yes, that's Optimus Prime as in the leader of the Autobots from Transformers. In case you were wondering, no, he wasn't in a red and blue semi-truck. The stolen vehicle was actually a white Mercedes. Anyway, according to police, Old Optimus has now been charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and as of a few days ago was being held at the Travis County Correctional Complex on an $8,000 bond. If you ask us, he might also want to consider another name change, maybe to Megatron, because stealing cars just feels more on brand for a Decepticon. Authorities in Harris County, Texas, say that a 60-year-old local man pleaded guilty in connection with a pair of stomach-churning incidents this week, months after he walked into two Houston-area antique stores and put several items into his anus before placing them back on display. The whole thing started back on February 10th, 2024, when the perpetrator, 60-year-old Mitchell Vest, traveled to a number of stores in the Houston suburb of Spring. In at least two of these businesses, he was reportedly witnessed taking items off of the shelf, putting them underneath a green skirt/kilt that he was wearing, and then shoving them into his anus. As if this weren't already disgusting enough, Vest then removed the items and placed them back where he found them, presumably so that an unsuspecting customer or staff member would pick them up. While the first incident was reported the day it happened, it appears that Vest wasn't actually arrested until 5 days later. That's when the owner of the second business noticed that she had caught footage of the 60-year-old in the act. In a rather unfortunate coincidence, her store is apparently called the Curiosity Shop. Speaking of curiosity, I know you're all curious to know what Vest was actually putting in his butt. I mean, maybe you're not, but regardless, I'm going to tell you anyway. According to reports, the items in question consisted of a makeup brush, an antique bottle opener, and an unspecified restoration hardware piece. Thankfully, it appears that in all cases, the items were found and thrown away before anyone unwittingly touched them. This week, Vest pleaded guilty to criminal mischief and was sentenced to 12 months probation. Since he is a first-time offender, authorities say that if he successfully completes his probationary term, the misdemeanor conviction will be wiped from his record. Authorities in Johnson County, Iowa say that a local woman is facing 2 misdemeanor charges this week after she allegedly called 911 and made a false report about a stalking and domestic violence situation because she wanted to back out of an online date. The whole thing apparently started just after midnight on June 16th when police received a 911 call from 18-year-old Sumaya Thomas. Thomas reportedly told an operator that her abusive ex-boyfriend had shown up outside her house and that he was sending her threats over Snapchat that he was going to hit, punch, kick, and stab her. She said that she had known this man for years and that she was pregnant with his baby. When officers arrived at Thomas's residence, which is located in a suburb of Iowa City, they spotted a man leaving the scene. Since he seemed to match the description in the report they had received, police detained the man and began to question him about what he was doing. It wasn't long before things took quite a bizarre turn. The man explained that not only was he not some abusive and threatening ex-boyfriend, he had only met Thomas about a week ago. They had encountered each other on a dating app and had made plans to meet up that night. Sure enough, the man was able to provide messages documenting and backing up his story. When police turned their attention back to Thomas, she eventually admitted that she had lied about everything. She claimed that she was supposed to go on a date with the man who officers had spoken to, but at the last minute she got cold feet and decided she didn't want to. Instead of just telling the guy this herself, Thomas apparently called 911. She even reportedly went as far as to say that she, quote, didn't think officers would help, so she made up this call and the events that she described, telling police it was, quote, because she didn't want the mail here and felt we wouldn't be able to do anything if she just called normally. Thomas was arrested for placing a false 911 call and making a fake report of an indictable offense, both of which are misdemeanors.
Authorities in Polk County, Florida say that they made quite the amusing arrest last week after a wanted local man went to significant lengths to avoid being found by officers, only to be given away by his ringing cell phone. It all started sometime on the afternoon of June 15th when Polk County Police received a call about a man causing a disturbance in the area of U.S. Route 98 North and Duff Road in the city of Lakeland. The man had left by the time officers arrived at the scene. However, they were quickly able to identify him as 38-year-old Joshua Garrett. As it happened, Garrett was wanted for violating his probation, which he had been given after being convicted of burglary, providing false information to a pawnbroker, and trafficking in stolen property. Upon learning this, police decided to pay Garrett a visit at a nearby business where he worked. When they arrived at the business, at first it seemed like police might have missed the 38-year-old once again. An initial search of the building came up empty. However, authorities decided to stick around after they were told that no one had actually seen Garrett leave the property. Officers discovered why a short time later, when they heard a familiar noise coming from part of the business's ceiling. That noise was the ringtone of a cell phone, and when police took a closer look, they also realized that the ceiling tiles had been disturbed in the same location. Not long after, they found Garrett hiding in the ceiling, when his hand was spotted sticking out from a section of insulation. Garrett was arrested and was taken to the Polk County Jail on that probation violation warrant. He has also now been charged with resisting and felony criminal mischief after allegedly causing about $1,000 worth of damage to the ceiling where he was hiding.
A Florida man may want to rethink whether he's cut out for a life of crime after he allegedly bungled a bank robbery on easy mode and police discovered he'd purchased his disguise at a convenience store across the street from the crime scene. The whole thing started sometime around 7 p.m. on June 15th, when officers from the Martin County Sheriff's Office were alerted by the security company of a Wells Fargo bank branch in the community of Hobe Sound. The company said that the branch's alarm system had been triggered a while ago and that they had reason to believe that a robbery might be in progress there. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered that no one was there. However, surveillance video showed a male suspect walking around inside the bank about an hour earlier and going through drawers and cabinets. He had been able to get inside because someone had left the door to the closed bank branch unlocked. Even with the door literally being open and the hour-long head start, though, the man had walked away empty-handed. While this was already pretty tough luck for the bumbling burglar, the situation got even more ridiculous. When police reviewed surveillance footage from a gas station convenience store across the street, they realized that the suspect had purchased a face mask there right before committing the crime. Not only did this footage show the man's full face, it also gave authorities information about the car he was driving. Using these leads, police were able to track the man down on June 18th. He was identified as 33-year-old Colton Van Honenstein and was placed under arrest. According to reports, Van Honenstein is now expected to face burglary charges as well as other offenses. Perhaps most amusing of all, if you think about it, the crime technically cost the 33-year-old money. He walked away empty-handed from the actual bank robbery, but the face mask he purchased cost him $5.
Authorities in Polk County, Florida say that a 34-year-old local corrections officer is facing charges this week after he needlessly escalated an already strange traffic violation incident to the point where he ended up being placed under arrest. The whole thing started at around 11:45 p.m. on June 30th when a Polk County deputy encountered a bizarre scene while out on patrol. While driving on Avenue G Northwest near Wrecker Highway, he came across a man in a red Jeep who was randomly blaring his horn while traveling down the road. This was despite the fact that there was no traffic around and there was seemingly no other reason to be doing this. The deputy pulled over the man, later identified as 34-year-old Polk County Correction Officer Douglas Morse. When asked what he was doing, Morse reportedly replied that he was honking his horn repeatedly, quote, "because it makes me drive faster." Unsurprisingly, this was not a valid excuse, so Morse was issued a traffic citation. Well, I say unsurprisingly, but apparently it was a big surprise to the 34-year-old because he immediately became enraged upon receiving it and allegedly began verbally abusing the deputy. Strangely, he also called 911 to complain about receiving the ticket. When the deputy realized what Morse was doing, he told him to stop. However, he refused to hang up. He ignored further commands and apparently continued to be uncooperative even after he was pulled from his Jeep. The 34-year-old was eventually transported to the Polk County Jail, where he was charged with misuse of the 911 system and resisting arrest without violence. After news of the situation was released, Morse was lambasted by local sheriff Grady Judd, who stated, quote, "We expect more professional behavior from those who work in the public service industry. And dialing 911 because you are upset that you received a traffic citation is not only ridiculous, it ties up an emergency line and resources that are designated for those who have true emergencies."
Authorities in Hennepin County, Minnesota say that a candidate for local public office is facing charges this week following a bizarre recent incident in which he allegedly terrorized a housemate, a situation that reportedly included tossing a live tarantula. The whole thing began a few weeks ago when the suspect in question, Marissa Simonetti, rented space in the 5-bedroom house where she was living to a local attorney named Jackie Vasquez. Jackie needed a quiet space to study for the California bar exam and was willing to pay for the short-term accommodation. At first, everything seemed fine. That was until Simonetti apparently decided that she wanted Jackie gone and was willing to go to pretty strange and disturbing lengths to achieve this. Simonetti, who is currently running for county commissioner in Hennepin County, later told the media that the problem started when Jackie began complaining about her accommodations. She claims that Jackie was upset by a, quote, spider infestation at the residence, and that she, quote, bombarded her with text messages about other problems there. This apparently angered Simonetti to the point that she decided to try and drive Jackie out of the house. Simonetti allegedly did this by unleashing a campaign of terror inside the home, one which included blasting Christian music, tossing items down the stairs, banging on pots and pans, and screaming at her housemaid. However, it's the last thing that she did that has garnered the most attention. In an apparent reference to the previous spider infestation complaint, Simonetti reportedly went out and purchased a live tarantula, which she tossed onto a staircase inside the residence sometime during the middle of these unhinged antics. This took place on June 21st, after which police were called and Simonetti was arrested. She has now been charged with 5th-degree assault and misdemeanor domestic assault. In a bizarre interview after posting bail and being released, Simonetti denied any wrongdoing, appearing to place the blame for everything that had happened on Jackie. However, when asked direct questions about what had taken place, she contradicted herself. At first, she claimed that Jackie was a squatter who she was simply trying to get to leave the house, though later acknowledged that she had paid $1,500 to her as part of their arrangement.
Why was she a squatter?
Someone who's in your home not paying, who's been asked to leave multiple times, is considered a squatter.
So she says she gave $1,500.
She says that she did.
Did she?
She did stay for a period of time. So she paid for the time when she was there. You know, when you're living in someone's home, you're using their utilities, there are all kinds of things. I mean, it's just normal.
So she paid, then why would she be a squatter?
If you're not currently paying, you've been asked to leave, the money, any excess funds have been returned to you, then you are not there. She was trespassed on Thursday. She was asked to leave.
It has since been reported that Simonetti does not in fact own the property where all of this took place, raising questions about whether she was legally allowed to rent out the space there in the first place.
And were you allowed to sublet?
That's the question that everybody wants to know. It's all pretty hazy, and it's a big house.
Yeah, okay.
When questioned specifically about the tarantula, Simonetti likened her actions to those of Kevin McAllister, the fictional character played by Macaulay Culkin in the 1990 movie Home Alone. She referred to the incident as, quote, kind of comical, defending her actions by arguing, quote, I mean, there is an element of humor to that movie, and at the end, what was I supposed to do? She finished by stating, quote, I'm good at creatively solving problems. At the end of the day, I didn't physically harm anybody. I'm a little unconventional in my ways, sometimes. I mean, I'm a silly goose. At the time of this recording, Simonetti is still in the race for Hennepin County Commissioner, where she continues to run under the now somewhat ironic slogan, Rebuilding Safety Through Family Values. However, it's unclear how much longer this will be the case, as additional reporting from local media has since unearthed a couple more skeletons in her closet. According to these reports, in 2016, Simonetti's real estate license was revoked due to, quote, fraudulent, deceptive, and dishonest practices. She was also previously sued by an ex-fiancé after he alleged that she tried to use his credit cards and money without his permission. Authorities in Lake County, Florida say that a local man was recently arrested following a bizarre incident in which he allegedly shot a delivery drone that was flying above his property, then told police that he did it because he thought it was watching him. The whole thing began on the evening of June 26th when crew members from a Virginia-based startup company called Drone Up were in the middle of a project for Walmart. The company, which specializes in using drones for commercial purposes, had partnered with the retail giant to explore how drone technology could be used to expand their home delivery capabilities. As part of the testing, they had gone to a neighborhood in the city of Claremont, where they were completing a few mock deliveries as a proof of concept. Things were apparently going well until just before 6 p.m. that day, when the crew members heard a loud sound as their drone was carrying a package on the 11,300 block of LeMay Drive. They gathered their equipment and got back in their vehicle, only to realize that the sound they heard was someone shooting at their drone. A bullet had struck the unit's payload system, causing a significant amount of damage. That's when they decided to call police. When officers arrived in the neighborhood, they found the alleged shooter, 72-year-old Dennis Wynn. Wynn explained that he had been in his backyard working on his pool pump when he noticed the drone flying overhead. Worried that it was, quote, watching him, Wynn reportedly went and retrieved a handgun from his house. He took a shot at the flying object, which at that point was about 75 feet up in the air, managing to land a direct hit. An exasperated Wynn could be seen on police body cam footage after speaking with officers, telling a neighbor that he was now being arrested for doing damage to the Walmart delivery drone. In the footage, he says that they told him that he had done $10,000 worth of damage to the vehicle, though according to reports, the actual claim from the company is $2,500. Wynn was arrested at the scene and charged with shooting at an aircraft, criminal mischief damage over $1,000, and firing a gun in public. Representatives from Ohio's Columbus Division of Police released some truly wild body cam footage this week, following a bizarre early morning burglary spree in which a man allegedly broke into several businesses, including a pet store, all while dressed in a ridiculous leopard print onesie. The whole thing started just after 3 a.m. on July 9th, when Columbus police were alerted about a possible burglary in progress at a local Rooster's chicken wing restaurant in the city of Hilliard. Officers arrived at the scene to find the glass front door to the building had been smashed and that someone had clearly been inside. There was no sign of the suspect. However, the situation quickly took a strange turn when officers began to notice that this wasn't the only business that had been broken into. A Petland store in the same shopping plaza had a number of its windows smashed as well, and there were now several animals running around in the plaza. Among them were a dog, multiple birds, and at least 2 rabbits. Police were still in the process of investigating and catching all of the loose animals when they received a call about yet another burglary. This time, a famous footwear store had been broken into in a neighboring plaza a little further down this same section of road. To their frustration, officers arrived to find that once again the suspect was already gone. It wasn't until nearly 2 hours later, a little before 5 a.m., that police finally caught up with the man allegedly behind the burglary spree. The man, later identified as 31-year-old Matthew Pancake, was found sleeping on a bench outside of a Big Lots store in yet another local shopping plaza. He was dressed in a leopard print onesie and was apparently covered in broken glass. When police moved in to make an arrest, they were hit with one final, incredibly strange discovery. It turned out that Pancake hadn't just freed the animals at the Petland store. He'd taken some of them along for the rest of his alleged crime spree, specifically a pair of hamsters that were found shoved down the legs of his ridiculous outfit. Body cam footage shows officers removing the rodents from Pancake's pants while placing him under arrest. At the time, the 31-year-old was also apparently wearing a stolen dog collar. At the time of this recording, Pancake remains in custody. He is now facing multiple charges, including breaking and entering and vandalism. Authorities in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, claim that a local 28-year-old man was quite literally down to clown when they allegedly caught him during a recent sting operation advertising sexual services while on break from a professional circus. According to police, it all started back in May when officers began conducting a sting operation targeting illegal sex work in the city of Carbondale. As part of this operation, police browsed online hubs where these services are usually advertised, eventually coming across a post made by 28-year-old Francis Bowie. An officer contacted Bowie over text, where they were apparently quoted sexual acts at an hourly rate of $100. The undercover cop agreed to the price and then met up with Bowie at a local hotel. When the 28-year-old showed up, he was arrested, though claimed that it was his first time doing anything like this, and that he, quote, knew it was wrong. Bowie went on to explain to police that he is a professional clown, and that he recently got back from performing with a traveling circus. He claimed that the money was so bad he was doing escort work to supplement his income. A Facebook page tied to his clown persona, the Amazing Franco, was later uncovered and apparently had a phone number on it that matched the one Bowie had allegedly used to correspond with the officer. Last week, the 28-year-old was charged with promoting prostitution, a misdemeanor offense. Authorities in Muskingum County, Ohio say that a 34-year-old woman pleaded guilty to more than 24 charges last week after she spent years terrorizing local emergency responders with fake 911 calls, crimes which they say not only routinely ate up valuable resources, but in one case resulted in another person's death. According to a press release distributed by the Muskingum County Prosecutor's Office, the problems began all the way back in 2020, when 34-year-old Keisha Kennedy began calling 911 for all sorts of non-existent emergencies. Most of these calls reportedly involved fake medical issues, in which Kennedy would pretend to suffer from all sorts of ailments. Each time, Kennedy would be taken to a hospital, only to be told that nothing was wrong with her. Unfortunately, even though they knew that she was faking, emergency workers and medical professionals still had to follow protocol. This meant countless responses from firefighters, dozens of unnecessary ambulance rides, and hospital staff needing to triage Kennedy every time she would be taken there. In total, authorities say that Kennedy falsely called 911 nearly 400 times and would often call multiple times in a single day. As you might imagine, Kennedy's abuse of the 911 system put incredible strain on local emergency workers, especially on the South Zanesville Fire Department. Sadly, this reportedly led to the death of at least one person. According to the press release, quote, ambulances and first responders transporting Kennedy for non-existent emergencies were unavailable to service those experiencing actual emergencies. For example, SZFD responders were unable to respond to a call involving a person unable to breathe because they were transporting Kennedy for a fake call. The person with breathing trouble later died. In another case, SZFD was understaffed for a fire due to personnel attending to Kennedy. In another example of Kennedy's shameless antics, the release detailed one of her many hospital visits. In that incident, which took place in August of 2023, the release states, quote, law enforcement officers responded to a report of a behavioral emergency at Licking Memorial Hospital involving Kennedy. Officers questioned Kennedy, and she pretended she was suddenly unable to stand or walk. After being helped into a sitting position on a bench, Kennedy pretended to be unconscious. She then pretended to wake up and told officers that she did not understand the meaning of being read her rights because she was disabled. As in Muskingum County, Newark law enforcement spoke with doctors at the hospital who confirmed that Kennedy was not disabled and did not need medical treatment or transfer to another hospital. While authorities stated that they believe that Kennedy suffers from a mental disorder that causes her to fake medical issues and symptoms, their frustration with how the situation was handled and their lack of ability to do anything sooner was obvious. Speaking about the case, Muskingum County Assistant Prosecutor John Lytle said in part, quote, obviously some type of check or balance needs to exist so that this type of abuse is more quickly reported by EMS to law enforcement, because 350 pointless ambulance runs is absolutely ridiculous. On July 12th, Kennedy pleaded guilty to felony disrupting public services, felony making false alarms, and 25 counts of misdemeanor misuse of 911 systems. According to reports, she will be sentenced at a later date. Authorities with Florida's Indian River County Sheriff's Office say that they dealt with a bizarre trespassing case this week after they found a strange man prowling around a retirement community, and he offered quite the novel excuse for his actions. The whole thing started just before 3 a.m. on July 17th, when Indian River County Police began receiving calls about an unknown man who was trespassing on the grounds of an independent senior living community in the city of Vero Beach. When officers went to check the situation out, they immediately got quite the surprise. The man in question was in a common area of the complex, and according to police reports, he was, quote, fully nude. It turned out that police actually knew him too. His name was Gregory Gornell, and he had previously been caught for trespassing here before. However, Gornell claimed that he had an explanation for his actions. You see, the Emperor had told him he could stay there. Confused? Yeah, apparently police were too. When asked what he was talking about, Gornell told officers that the retirement community was, quote, under new management, and that the Emperor told him he could stay there. The 44-year-old also stated that he was, quote, staying at the facility because he was the Emperor's helper. Officers asked Gornell how they could get in touch with this so-called Emperor, to which Gornell apparently replied, quote, through the electric lines. At this point, the 44-year-old was arrested and charged with misdemeanor trespass. It seems that his previous criminal history may also offer some insight into his bizarre behavior. According to reports, he has a number of previous convictions for drug-related crimes, including cocaine possession, marijuana possession, and possession of drug paraphernalia. Authorities in Lancaster County, Nebraska say that a local teen is facing serious charges this week, several months after he allegedly caused an extremely dangerous and expensive train derailment so that he could get footage of the crash for his YouTube channel. According to reports, the wild incident took place back on April 21st, when the train in question, which was owned and operated by BNSF Railway, was on its usual route to deliver coal to a power plant in Nebraska City. The train was passing through the city of Bennett when suddenly its conductor noticed that something wasn't right. As he was approaching a crossing at the intersection of Monroe and Juniper Streets, he could tell that one of the track switches was misaligned. He attempted to perform an emergency stop, but unfortunately, it was already too late. 2 of the locomotives, as well as 5 of the train's cars, veered off the tracks, slamming into another empty coal car seconds later. Thankfully, the derailment was nowhere near as bad as it could have been. Neither the locomotive or the cars flipped over, and no one was injured. Still, the whole thing resulted in more than $350,000 worth of damage. When officials were sent out to the scene to investigate, they quickly began to suspect that the situation was no accident. Part of this had to do with the misaligned switch itself. Upon closer examination, a padlock for the device was found to be missing, indicating it had likely been tampered with. However, what was even more of a giveaway was the behavior of a 17-year-old boy at the scene who claimed to be a witness. Let's just say he wasn't exactly subtle. Upon seeing an investigator arrive to inspect the crash scene, the teen immediately came over to them. The boy, who is described as a train enthusiast in court reports, proceeded to ask the investigator what had happened. When the investigator said they didn't know yet, the boy reportedly replied, quote, "Obviously a switch was flipped the wrong way." Understandably, this caught the attention of the investigator, who began asking more questions of the 17-year-old. He denied trespassing in the area or tampering with the switch, but allegedly went on to show the investigator footage he had recorded of the derailment on a camera he brought with him. Witnesses later claimed that they had seen the teen setting up this same camera on a tripod just 4 minutes before the crash. As unbelievable as all of this already was, the case gets even more ridiculous from here. Authorities allege that a few days later, the teen posted footage of the incident to his YouTube channel, Z-Unit 6. In the video, which the 17-year-old also apparently sent to a local news outlet, he can be heard reacting during the derailment as if he's totally shocked by what's going on, saying, quote, "Oh my God, oh my freaking God," and "Are they okay?" The teen titled the video, quote, "Most insane video I've ever taken," in all capital letters. This week, the 17-year-old was charged with 2 counts of criminal mischief causing damage worth more than $5,000, both of which are felony charges. He has not been identified due to his age, though prosecutors have already filed a motion to have the case transferred from juvenile to adult court. If convicted, the teen could be looking at penalties ranging from a $15,000 fine to 7 years in prison. I don't know what it is about insane child abuse cases this week, but this last story might just be simultaneously one of the most disturbing and ridiculous things I've ever heard. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a 40-year-old local mother is behind bars this week after she injured her daughter as part of an unhinged attack which she seemed to be treating as a joke. According to reports, the whole thing took place sometime on the evening of July 26th when the woman in question, 40-year-old Jacqueline Gazinski, was hanging picture frames with her 3 children in her new rental home in the city of St. Petersburg. While the circumstances of what happened are unclear, it's said that at one point Gazinski turned to her 12-year-old daughter with an extremely strange question. She asked the girl, quote, "Have you ever been screwed in the ass?" before proceeding to drill a real screw into her left butt cheek. As wild as this already sounds, it was no joke. Gazinski literally drilled the screw into the child to the point that it was stuck in her body until she was able to pull it out. Understandably, this left behind a visible wound, which was explained when police were called. Gazinski was arrested for felony child abuse and is currently being held on $25,000 bond. She has also been ordered to have no contact with her daughter. Representatives from the Maryland State Fire Marshal's office say that a 59-year-old alleged firebug is facing a number of charges this week after he was accused of trying to burn down a restaurant in what authorities say could be the result of a petty grudge against one of the country's largest pizza franchises. The whole thing started at around 6:30 a.m. on August 3rd, when emergency responders in the city of Westminster were called about a fire at a Domino's pizza restaurant on the 400 block of Baltimore Boulevard. Firefighters arrived to find the blaze at the rear of the building. It's unclear if the fire was actually inside the business or was simply outside against the back wall. However, what we do know is that the situation was contained pretty quickly and was put out within a matter of minutes. We also know how it was started. According to the state fire marshal's office, a bunch of boxes and bags containing feces had been piled up and set ablaze. It wasn't long before authorities were able to track down a suspect. Thanks to a report from a witness, police were led to a nearby auto repair shop where they found 59-year-old George W. Cook allegedly trying to break into vehicles. Cook was placed under arrest immediately. The whole thing gets even stranger because apparently this is not Cook's first rodeo, so to speak. Investigators say that the Domino's fire matches the MO of a number of small fires that they've responded to in the area over the last few weeks, all of which were also started with flaming boxes and bags of feces. In case you're wondering, reports don't specify whether it was human or animal feces used to set the fires, though personally at this point I don't know which one would be weirder. Anyway, as for why the Domino's was specifically targeted, authorities aren't 100% sure, though it's possible that Cook might have a grudge against the business. According to the store's manager, the 59-year-old had come in there earlier in the week and became aggressive after he was denied free food. When he was asked to leave, he reportedly kicked over a trash can. Cook is now facing a number of charges, including second-degree arson, first- and second-degree malicious burning, malicious destruction of property over $1,000, and theft under $100. Over the course of this series, we've covered plenty of stories where people came up with very inventive ways to hide illegal drugs. Obviously, many of these people weren't that successful, since we know about these cases. However, you might say that they at least made a good faith effort. The woman in this next segment took a completely different approach. Instead of trying to conceal her illicit substances, she apparently threw them in a labeled bag. It all started around 11:30 a.m. on July 27th, when officers with Florida's Highway Patrol conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle in the community of Leland. They decided to stop the car in question after seeing that the passenger, later identified as 41-year-old Lauren Riley, was not wearing a seatbelt and appeared to be rummaging around on the floorboard. After walking up to the vehicle, police realized that there was an open container of alcohol inside, as well as what appeared to be a burnt piece of tinfoil and a plastic straw. The driver said that these belonged to Riley, but both were asked to step out of the car so that officers could conduct a probable cause search. Based on what they had found, the officers already suspected that there was drug activity going on in the vehicle. However, even they were stunned by what they found. Inside of Riley's purse was a bag literally labeled "bag of drugs." According to Florida Highway Patrol, the bag of drugs contained precisely what the label advertised, specifically a gram of meth, 1.71 grams of crack cocaine, 3.25 grams of powder cocaine, 1.5 hydromorphone pills, 2 amphetamine pills, 4.5 Xanax pills, and a variety of other drug paraphernalia. Riley was arrested on a number of drug charges as well as a drug paraphernalia charge. The driver, meanwhile, was arrested for having an open container of alcohol. Authorities in Georgetown County, South Carolina, say that a pair of siblings are each facing charges this week following an unhinged family brawl inside of their residence, one that apparently started as an argument over how to cook chicken. The incident began sometime on the evening of July 28th, when Georgetown police were called to a residence on Cody Lane with reports of a domestic situation in progress. They arrived to find quite the hectic situation. Officers were told that it all started when one of the residents, 27-year-old Anthony Harper, was cooking a chicken and he was confronted by his 25-year-old sister Hope. She challenged him on the bird's preparation, asking, quote, why he didn't season the chicken that was cooking so it could crust up. When Anthony replied, quote, I know how to cook and Grammy was going to season the chicken, Hope reportedly shot back with, quote, you're not human, you're a dumb dog. That was the point when all hell apparently broke loose. According to witnesses, Anthony began punching and pushing Hope as another sibling stepped in and tried to restrain him. As the two continued to scrap, yet another person inside the residence went and grabbed a handgun, firing a warning shot into the air, evidently believing that this would calm the situation. Instead, all it appears to have done is damage the ceiling. At some point, things escalated further when Hope allegedly grabbed a steak knife and began swinging it around and chasing her brother. Anthony ran away, yelling, quote, she's going to kill me, prompting their grandmother to come out of her room. Armed with a broom, the elderly woman was able to wave Hope off, who put the knife back in the kitchen. Even at this point, though, the conflict wasn't quite over. According to reports, Anthony ran back in once his sister was unarmed, spraying her in the face and neck with a can of Raid bug spray. Hope managed to wrestle the can away from the 27-year-old during another struggle and apparently proceeded to give him a few blasts with the bug spray as well. After statements had been taken from all of those inside the home, both Anthony and Hope told officers they wanted to press charges against each other, and they were both taken into custody. They were charged with assault and battery, though Anthony was slapped with 2 counts because their other sibling who intervened in the conflict said that she wanted to press charges as well because Anthony had scratched her arms during the struggle. Unfortunately, sources do not mention whether the family's chicken was ever properly seasoned. In other bizarre vehicle theft-related news, authorities in Des Moines, Iowa say that a local man is facing charges this week after he allegedly committed a carjacking while completely naked. According to reports, the strange incident began at around 3:30 a.m. on August 6th when the suspect, Tyler Johnson, was spotted running down Court Avenue in the city's downtown wearing no clothes. At first, onlookers were both perplexed and mildly amused. That was, until things got a lot more dangerous. After approaching the driver of a black sedan, Johnson reportedly jumped through the driver's side window and into the passenger seat. The car's startled owner got out as Johnson then climbed over into the driver's seat. Video footage captured of the incident shows the men briefly arguing and the victim throwing a punch at Johnson before he abruptly throws the vehicle in reverse. The open door of the car knocked the male victim to the ground and briefly dragged him before Johnson sped off. Thankfully, the victim wasn't seriously injured, though it sounds like his car is in for some expensive repairs. By the time police caught up with Johnson, he had allegedly crashed the vehicle into a tree not far from the original crime scene. At the time of this recording, Johnson remains in custody and has been charged with second-degree theft and driving while barred. For reasons I'm sure we can all understand, he is currently undergoing a mental health evaluation to see if he is competent to stand trial. Authorities in San Antonio, Texas announced that a 46-year-old man is facing charges in connection with an equally strange and disturbing case this week after he was accused of booby-trapping bathrooms at a pair of local car washes with fireworks, a crime that left at least 3 people injured. The first incident took place on July 20th at the washtub location on Bandera Road in the city of Helotes. According to reports, a woman went to use one of the business's unisex bathrooms. However, moments after sitting down on the toilet, there was a small explosion. The woman suffered minor injuries but left before police could arrive to investigate. 6 days later, 2 very similar incidents took place just minutes apart at a second washtub car wash in San Antonio at Loop 1604 near Highway 281. Once again, the victims went to use the business's bathrooms, only for an explosion to occur right after they sat down on the toilet. This time, the victims were a female washtub employee and a young girl. When police looked into the situation, they discovered remnants of small commercial fireworks that had been used to create the explosions. The fireworks were designed to detonate when pressure was applied to them. After reviewing surveillance footage at both car wash locations, it apparently wasn't difficult to figure out who was behind the weird toilet booby trapping. Footage clearly showed a man going into all of the affected washrooms a short time before each incident occurred, and then sitting in the business's lobby and watching intently as victims went inside. As soon as the fireworks were triggered, the man got up and left. Employees at the car wash chain were easily able to identify the man in the videos as 46-year-old Paul Moses Alden. Not only was he reportedly a regular at the businesses, he had a membership card there, and employees were able to give police video of his vehicle and license plate. Alden was arrested and charged with arson causing reckless damage or bodily injury. The incidents are still under investigation, and the 46-year-old could still be facing further charges.
Authorities in Des Moines, Iowa say that a 48-year-old man is facing serious charges this week following a wild incident in which he allegedly shot his elderly father after the man made a comment about his foot odor. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 9:30 p.m. on August 11th when police were dispatched to a home on the 2700 block of Monarch Drive in the city of Burlington. A 48-year-old man, later identified as David Carpenter, called 911 saying that he had just shot his father during the middle of an argument. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the victim, 74-year-old William Carpenter, suffering from a gunshot wound. He was rushed to a hospital and thankfully survived. William and David were both questioned by investigators, revealing the true ridiculousness of the situation. The two were apparently watching TV in the living room of their home when William told his son he had stinky feet. Apparently, this one comment was enough to send David into a full-blown rage. During a subsequent argument, David went into his room, retrieved a gun, and shot his father in the face while he was sitting in his mobility scooter. To top it all off, this apparently happened while two children under the age of 14 were present. Though David claimed the gun had gone off accidentally, it seems that police did not buy the excuse. He was arrested on charges of attempted murder and child endangerment, and has since been ordered to have no contact with his father.
Authorities in Otter Tail County, Minnesota say that a 30-year-old woman was arrested on multiple charges last week after she allegedly tried to run over her boyfriend during the middle of an argument. The whole thing reportedly took place shortly before 1 p.m. on August 10th, when 30-year-old Veronica Rolene Gast and the unidentified male victim were driving in the city of Fergus Falls. Ironically, the pair were on their way to couples therapy when the argument they had been having all day boiled over. Things turned ugly after the man said that he was done and that he wanted to be taken home. That's when Gast reportedly stopped the vehicle and demanded that her boyfriend get out. The man apparently obliged and started heading for a nearby sidewalk. However, as he passed in front of the vehicle, the car suddenly accelerated forward. The man managed to turn his body at the last second and went up over the hood, shattering the windshield. Apparently, Gast kept driving for a short distance before stopping and calling 911. When officers arrived at the scene, Gast reportedly told them that her part of the situation was a complete accident. She said she was distraught from the argument and wasn't paying attention. She also claimed that her windshield hadn't been shattered from the force of the impact, rather that her boyfriend had punched it afterwards. However, the alleged victim disputed all of this. The man said that not only had the broken windshield been caused by him being hit, Gast had done it on purpose. He said that the two of them had made eye contact as he was walking in front of the car, and that she had accelerated deliberately before he could get out of the way. He had a laceration on the back of his elbow that seemed to back up his story. As a result, Gast was arrested on charges of second-degree assault, criminal vehicular operation, bodily harm, gross negligence, and domestic assault. At the time of this recording, it appears that Gast has been released from custody. Given what happened, though, it looks like she might be doing her therapy sessions solo for the foreseeable future. Authorities in Gulfport, Mississippi put out a hilarious and valuable PSA about always double-checking who you're contacting this week after an officer got quite the interesting proposition during a wrong number text exchange. According to reports, the whole thing started around 10 p.m. on August 16th, when an officer from the Gulfport Police Department received a text from an unknown number. The message simply said, "Yo." And when the officer responded, it was obvious that this person clearly thought they knew him. Things quickly got more interesting when the unknown person asked the officer if they wanted to smoke before implying that they had some high-quality marijuana. Unbelievably, when the officer replied, quote, "I don't think I'm going to be able to smoke with you," the person replied, quote, "Bruh, we smoke all the time." At this point, the officer attempted to let the unknown messenger know that they had the wrong number. When he did, though, he received this incredulous response, quote, "Bruh, stop cappin'." For those unfamiliar, cappin' is slang for lying. Rather than continue at this point, the officer responded with a picture of himself holding his badge, as well as a message that read, "No cap." As you might imagine, that's when the exchange came to an abrupt end. Photos of the conversation were put out by the police department this week, who recounted the ridiculous situation on social media. In their post, they added, quote, "Pro tip, before you send the text, double check the number. Nothing like a wrong number text to really spice up someone's day." At the time of this recording, it's unclear if police identified the person behind the wrong number text. Representatives from New Jersey's Bridgeton Police Department say that a 24-year-old woman is facing multiple charges this week after video footage of her recently went viral in which she can be seen nearly losing her hand while recklessly taunting a tiger at a local zoo. The whole thing started sometime on August 18th, when police were alerted to the footage by several concerned parkgoers at the Cohanzic Zoo. The video shows a young woman climbing the 4-foot wooden fence surrounding the Siberian tiger enclosure before making her way to the inner cage. Once there, she can be seen sticking her hand inside in an apparent attempt to pet one of the big cats. As you might imagine, this was a terrible and dangerous idea. The tiger quickly comes over and can be seen considering the woman for a moment before lunging and attempting to bite her hand. She is able to pull it away at the very last second, after which she appears to pose as if someone is taking her photo. She then climbs back over the fence and leaves. Police shared footage of the woman on August 20th, asking for help from members of the public to track her down. She has since been identified as a 24-year-old Millville woman named Zaire Dennis. As ridiculous as Dennis's close call with the tiger already was, authorities now say that it wasn't the only time she decided to push her luck that day. After this was filmed, she allegedly did the same thing at a bear enclosure at the zoo. Dennis has now been charged with defiant trespassing and was also cited for 2 violations of city ordinances for disobeying posted signage at the zoo. She is scheduled to appear in court in the coming week. Authorities in Porter County, Indiana say that they recently had to respond to the scene of a rather unique food fight after a 28-year-old Chicago woman allegedly attempted to shamelessly exploit an all-you-can-eat special at a popular nationwide restaurant chain. The whole thing started on the evening of August 2nd, when police were called about a disturbance at an Applebee's restaurant in the city of Portage. Dispatchers informed them that they had received reports that a party of diners at the restaurant were screaming and making threats due to a dispute over the conditions of a menu special there. That dispute was with Applebee's $15.99 limited-time all-you-can-eat special. Apparently, a woman, later identified as 28-year-old Shanisha Cobbs, had come in with 2 other adults and several juveniles. They proceeded to order a single one of the specials, which they allegedly used to feed the entire table. When staff noticed this and the manager informed Cobbs that she and her party were being charged for an additional meal, she promptly freaked out. When police arrived at the scene and attempted to get to the bottom of what was going on, Cobbs and her group argued that the Applebee's menu never specified that they couldn't all eat off of one order. Of course, this was not true, and officers were quickly given a menu that clearly stated that the $15.99 price was per person. Personally, I have a hard time believing anyone was genuinely confused by this. I mean, it's all you can eat after all, not all y'all can eat. When Cobbs was informed of this, though, she did not take it well. She allegedly continued to yell and scream, picked a fight with another random pair of diners, and despite repeated warnings from police and attempts by her friend to calm her down, would not listen. Eventually, she was taken into custody for disorderly conduct. According to reports, Cobbs' shameless attempt to get a cheap meal could now cost her a lot more than an extra charge on her bill. She's looking at up to 180 days in jail, plus a $1,000 fine. Representatives from the U.S. Marshals Service say that a wanted fugitive almost quite literally fell into their laps this week after they went to search a property for him and he chose a rather unfortunate hiding place. The case began sometime back on April 2nd of 2024, when Memphis police were called about a disturbance at the Cavalier Court Apartments on Perez Avenue. Officers had just arrived in the area and were checking the situation out when suddenly they heard gunshots coming from nearby. They followed the source of the noises, where they found a man named Troy Cunningham. Troy was lying on the ground and had been fatally shot in the back of the head. Stray gunfire also struck a vehicle with 2 women in it, causing one to suffer a gunshot wound to her shoulder. Following an investigation, police were able to identify 3 suspects in connection with the crime. They were later identified as Jarius Hibbler, Tamarius Barron, and Diario Wilkerson. Hibbler and Barron were quickly tracked down and arrested. However, Wilkerson proved more difficult to locate. By the time a warrant was put out for first-degree murder charges against him on May 9th, the 20-year-old was nowhere to be found. The U.S. Marshals were brought in to assist with capturing Wilkerson, and over the next couple of months continued to follow leads concerning his whereabouts. The trail ultimately led to a residence where one of the 20-year-old's family members lived that ended up being not very far from the crime scene. Authorities obtained a search warrant for the property, which was executed on August 26th. They were prepared to carry out a thorough search of the place. However, that turned out not to be necessary. Shortly after they began looking around, Wilkerson, who had been hiding in the attic, came crashing through the drywall of the ceiling, Christmas Vacation style. Reports don't mention if he was wistfully watching old home movies up there on a reel-to-reel film projector, but what we do know is that, much like Clark Griswold, Wilkerson wasn't injured from the comedic fall. Following the incident, he was immediately taken to jail. According to reports, in addition to his original first-degree murder charge, the 20-year-old is now facing several others, including reckless endangerment, tampering with evidence, reckless driving, vehicle burglary, gun theft, and evading arrest. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida, say that a man is facing charges this week in connection with quite the bizarre case after a dispute between 2 doctors over a medical practice allegedly escalated to one of them soaking the place twice in a foul-smelling liquid. The whole thing apparently started near the end of 2022 when the suspect, 59-year-old internist Dr. Giovanni Paolo, sold his St. Petersburg medical practice to another man, 32-year-old Dr. Dylan Dinesh. At first, it seemed like an ordinary transaction. However, at some point, things went off the rails. Reports don't mention what caused the relationship between the 2 men to sour. All we know is what Paolo is accused of doing next. According to an arrest affidavit released this week, Dr. Paolo is accused of going to Dinesh's business, Affiliated Health Clinics, on 2 separate occasions. Both times, he allegedly covered the doors to the offices in gallons of a mysterious liquid that apparently left behind an all too familiar stench. Piss. Yeah, police are pretty sure it was piss. The first incident reportedly happened on July 30th, while the second took place just earlier this month on August 17th. Both times, Paolo and his vehicle were recorded by the clinic's surveillance cameras. The affidavit goes on to say that because the doors to the building were made of wood, the odor of the urine-smelling liquid completely soaked in and was impossible to get rid of, to the point that Dinesh apparently had to replace them. He alleges that this will cost $1,500 and that his practice suffered an additional $6,000 in other associated losses from the pee-related vandalism. Paolo was arrested on August 27th and has been charged with 1 felony count of criminal mischief. He was released from custody after posting a $5,000 cash bond. Representatives from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police say that a woman is facing charges in connection with quite the bizarre and unsettling burglary case this week, after she allegedly broke into a local funeral home and carried off one of their caskets with a body inside. The incident began sometime in the early morning hours of August 27th, when Las Vegas police received a call about a dead body outside of a business. The caller stated that the person was lying face down in front of the Affordable Cremation and Burial Service funeral home, right near the intersection of West Charleston Boulevard and Rancho Drive. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the body as described, though it quickly became clear that the situation was stranger than they ever could have imagined. The body in question was lying in some rocks near the front walkway of the business, and its feet were covered with plastic bags. An empty casket was also found on the nearby sidewalk. Police were soon able to review surveillance footage from the funeral home, which revealed what had happened. The video allegedly showed a woman smashing a front window at the business and then reaching in to unlock a door. The woman had gone on to make a number of trips in and out of the funeral home, including one in which she had dragged the casket containing the body outside. Employees at the funeral home were able to verify that the body had originally been brought there on August 20th. A viewing for the deceased person was held the day before the strange incident. 2 days later, the alleged thief was caught after she was recognized at a local convenience store. She has since been identified as 47-year-old Patricia Sierra. When questioned about the crime, Sierra apparently blamed substance abuse problems, saying that she didn't remember doing it and, quote, blacked out from drinking 6 beers. She was arrested and is now facing charges of grand larceny, burglary of a business, and removing, transforming, or disturbing human remains. Authorities in Crockett County, Tennessee say that they dealt with quite the bizarre situation this week after a reality TV star was bitten by an animal at a local zoo, and they ended up arresting her and a male companion on drug charges. The whole thing began sometime on September 2nd when police were called about a situation at the Tennessee Safari Park in the town of Alamo. They, as well as other emergency responders, were dispatched to the zoo after learning that a female guest there had been bitten by a camel. As weird as this already was, things were about to get even stranger, because according to reports, the victim of this camel bite was 36-year-old reality TV star Amy Slayton Halterman. Slayton Halterman is one of the main characters in the TLC show 1,000 Pound Sisters. The program, which began in 2020, documents the lives of Slayton Halterman and her sister Tammy Slayton, who at the time weighed a combined total of more than 1,000 pounds. When officers arrived at the scene that day, the 36-year-old was immediately tended to, but something else quickly caught their attention. In a subsequent report, they stated, quote, deputies were immediately overtaken by suspicious odors coming from the guest's vehicle. The officers performed a search of Slayton Halterman's vehicle, allegedly recovering both marijuana and magic mushrooms. As a result, after being bandaged up for her camel bite, the 36-year-old was arrested along with her male companion, Brian Scott Lovern. The pair are each now facing charges of possession of a Schedule I drug, illegal possession of a Schedule VI drug, and 2 counts of child endangerment, since Slayton Halterman's 2 young boys were with them at the time. According to reports, the boys were later picked up by the 36-year-old's sister/co-star. Representatives from the NYPD say that a 55-year-old man has been slapped with numerous charges this week following a wild road rage incident in which he allegedly stole a tow truck that was getting ready to haul off his illegally parked vehicle. The dramatic incident unfolded sometime on September 9th, when the victim, an unidentified tow truck driver, was called to remove an illegally parked Chevy Silverado pickup from outside of a business in Brooklyn's Sunset Park neighborhood. The black pickup truck had reportedly been left in front of the doors of a loading zone, though some sources state that the vehicle was simply being repossessed. Either way, what happened next was truly unhinged. The tow truck driver had gotten the pickup onto his hitch and was in the middle of securing it when he was confronted by the vehicle's owner, later identified as 55-year-old Russell Lyosa. And let's just say, he wasn't too happy to discover what was going on. In video footage recorded by witnesses, Lyosa can be seen screaming at the tow truck driver and making threats. He allegedly tried to fight the driver in the street while yelling things such as, quote, dude, put my f***ing truck down now, and quote, I'm warning you, motherfucker, get the f*** away from my truck. When the freakout failed to stop the tow truck driver, the 55-year-old took a much more desperate and dangerous approach. After jumping behind the wheel of the tow truck, Lyosa allegedly began to drive down 53rd Street with his own pickup still attached. In the video, you can see as the driver's side door is ripped fully backwards on its hinges as the vehicle begins to smash into numerous parked cars lining the road. Before long, the pickup, which appears to have only been partially secured, flies off completely and rolls across the street. Thankfully, it seems that no one was injured as a result of the incident, though it's easy to see how things could have turned out differently. Police announced that Lyosa had been arrested a few days later and is now facing charges including robbery, grand larceny auto, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an accident, and 11 counts of property damage. Representatives from Washington's Pierce County Sheriff's Office released dramatic body cam footage of a bizarre recent arrest this week after a man with several warrants out for his arrest was finally tracked down, and he tried to make one last desperate escape attempt while completely naked. According to a press release put out by the Sheriff's Office this week, the whole thing started back on August 11th when Pierce County deputies were called about a sleeping man in a stolen Ford F-550. Officers arrived and attempted to speak to the man. However, he almost immediately fled the scene. A pursuit began, one which headed into King County and then Snohomish County before heading back down towards Seattle. That's when the man ultimately crashed before running away on foot. Though the male suspect managed to get away, he left behind his girlfriend and 4-year-old son in the vehicle. Police recognized the suspect as a man who had several felony warrants out for his arrest and was known to carry firearms. 10 days later, on August 21st, the Pierce County Sheriff's Office received another call about a suspicious vehicle, this time a car. When they traveled to the area and ran the car's plates, they realized that the vehicle belonged to the girlfriend that they had dealt with in the previous incident. The same 3 people were inside. Police set up a perimeter and demanded that all of them get out, but the 4-year-old child was the only one who complied with orders. He was taken to safety by officers before they fired a less lethal 40mm round at the back of the vehicle to make a hole in the rear windshield. The woman screamed that she was getting dressed, and it appeared for a second that she and the suspect might cooperate. However, moments later, the man ran from the car and took off completely naked. After jumping over multiple fences, the man once again seemed to escape. However, this time police came prepared with a canine named Bronco. Bronco was able to track the nude fugitive and ultimately found him hiding in a trash bin in the community of Frederickson. The male suspect, who was not identified by police, was taken into custody and is now facing a number of charges. Authorities finished off their press release by shouting out the real hero of the day, Canine Bronco. Authorities in Essex County, Massachusetts say that an elderly landlord is facing a number of charges this week following a strange housing dispute in which he allegedly drove a piece of heavy machinery into one of his own cabins because he didn't like the person he was renting to. The whole thing started sometime on the evening of September 14th when police were called about a dangerous situation on a property in the town of Salisbury. The place was owned by 77-year-old John Sanborn, who lived there and also rented out some smaller cabins on his land. When officers arrived, they discovered that one of these cabins had been pushed roughly 3 to 5 feet off of its foundation. The site was pretty wild, but the story behind it was even crazier. Sanborn told police that he was unhappy with the people he rented that particular cabin to and said that it was because of the amount of drugs they were bringing onto his property. What he apparently neglected to mention was that he had rammed the cabin with a front-wheel loader while his tenants were inside. The woman who rents the cabin, who has reportedly been living there for the last 18 months, stated that Sanborn became irate that evening when he saw her boyfriend there. About 15 minutes later, she said she was lying down inside when she felt a large crash, which was allegedly the impact from the construction vehicle slamming into the home. Due to the damage, the place has now been deemed too dangerous to enter. While police haven't weighed in on any of Sanborn's claims about his tenant's drug use, they have alleged that he was breaking some laws of his own. During a search of his nearby farm property, they seized a loaded handgun and several rifles, which they say were being stored improperly. The 77-year-old has now been charged with 2 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct, and improper storage of a firearm. Following his release after arraignment, Sanborn was questioned by local media about what had happened, but apparently wasn't feeling very chatty. When asked about whether a piece of construction equipment had gone into the cabin, he responded, quote, Well, I guess there is a possibility. He refused to elaborate, though, telling reporters, quote, "You ain't going to get a story." Unfortunately for Sanborn, it appears that he was wrong. The 77-year-old has been ordered to stay away from his tenants and is due back in court in October. A Florida man reportedly found himself in quite the bizarre situation this week after he found a would-be thief trapped inside of his luxury vehicle, and the culprit was caught on footage simultaneously begging for help while also pretending he'd done nothing wrong. The whole thing started sometime on the morning of September 16th, when the victim, Julio Solano, walked into the parking garage where he had left his Corvette in Miami Beach. Julio had just finished having breakfast nearby and was completely unprepared for what happened next. As soon as he walked into the garage, he said the attendant flagged him down and told him that someone was in his vehicle. At first, he thought it was a joke. However, moments later, he saw a man who appeared to be ducking down and hiding inside the driver's seat of his Corvette. Julio contacted police, though while he waited for them to arrive, he decided to confront the man. He also pulled out his phone and started recording. It's a good thing he did, because the interaction was pretty unbelievable. After walking up to his car, Julio asked the man, later identified as 33-year-old Ravesh Rabindranath, what he was doing. Rabindranath tried to play it cool. He claimed that he was actually the owner of the car and acted like he wasn't doing anything wrong. That led to the following bizarre exchange.
My brother, this is not your car, this is my car. But why are you in my car? No, you can't get out, because we calling the cops. What do you mean for what? This is Grand Theft Auto. I don't know what, are you trying to steal my car? What are you doing? No, that has nothing to do with nothing, bro. Bro, so just, what were you doing in my car?
As you just heard, Rabindranath was all over the place. While he still sort of seemed like he was pretending to own the vehicle, he was also clearly trapped inside and wanted help getting out. Strangely, he also acted confused when Julio said he was calling the police. When officers arrived, Rabindranath was immediately arrested. Speaking about the wild incident with local media afterwards, Julio stated he had no idea how Rabindranath got inside his car, but that without the key, none of the vehicle's electrical components would have worked. There is a manual door release under the seat, but the 33-year-old didn't know about this because, it wasn't his car. Rabindranath has now been charged with burglary to an unoccupied conveyance. He has since been released on a $2,500 bond. Representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania say that a 25-year-old man has pleaded guilty to 2 serious charges this week, following an unhinged plot to frame another man for threats of mass violence, crimes which were allegedly related to a dispute over fantasy football. According to a press release put out by the attorney's office this week, the whole thing started back in early August of 2023, when the culprit, 25-year-old Matthew Gabriel, submitted an anonymous tip over the internet to the Norwegian Police Security Service. In that tip, Gabriel falsely claimed that a man in his fantasy football group, who was scheduled to study abroad in the country later that month, was planning to carry out an attack there. Gabriel stated that the man, who has not been identified, was organizing a mass shooting attack with multiple accomplices. The tip read in part, quote, "They plan to take as many as they can at a concert and then head to a department store. I don't know any more than that. I just can't have random people dying on my conscience. He plans to arrive there unarmed, spend a couple of days normal, and then execute the attack. Please be ready." Understandably, the threat was taken seriously, prompting a 5-day investigation that involved more than 900 man-hours and eventually roped in the FBI. It was during interviews with FBI agents that Gabriel finally admitted the whole thing was a lie. Even after being caught, though, the 25-year-old apparently did the same thing again. Months later, in March of 2024, he reportedly sent another phony tip to the University of Iowa, this time about a bomb threat. In his email, Gabriel stated, quote, "Hello, University of Iowa. A man named blank told me he was going to blow up the school." He included a screenshot from his fantasy football's group chat, which purported to show the victim making the threats. However, just like the previous time, when investigators looked into the situation, they realized that there was no real danger and that Gabriel was well aware of this. Specifically, he had cropped out part of the message and sent it without context that indicated it was very clearly a joke. This week, the 25-year-old pleaded guilty to 2 federal counts of transmitting interstate threats. Though the crimes carry a possible sentence of up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, because of a deal that Gabriel made with prosecutors, it's likely that he will be spared jail time. Instead, they recommended he receive 15 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation. As for why Gabriel did this in the first place, sources don't mention, other than to say that the victim was a rival of the 25-year-olds in his fantasy football league. Understandably, Gabriel was lambasted by law enforcement officials, including United States Attorney Jacqueline C. Romero, who stated in part, quote, "His actions were extremely disruptive and consumed significant law enforcement resources on 2 continents, diverting them from actual incidents and investigations. Hoax threats aren't a joke or protected speech. They're a crime. My advice to keyboard warriors who'd like to avoid federal charges: always think of the potential consequences before you hit post or send." Authorities in Madison, Wisconsin say that they arrested a shameless thief with quite the healthy appetite this week, one who allegedly broke into a woman's home and cooked herself a nice meal and even tried to pretend she was supposed to be there. The whole thing started at around 10:30 p.m. on September 24th, when the female victim, who has not been identified by name, arrived home to find that all of her lights were on. This was pretty strange since she had been gone the whole day and she didn't remember leaving anything running. She discovered what was going on after she investigated further and found that a stranger had made herself very comfortable inside. Not only was she pretty relaxed, she had cooked herself an entire pasta and shrimp dinner. The victim understandably called police, who arrived at the scene about 10 minutes later. That's when things got even weirder. After officers called out to the suspect, later identified as Joanna Kelly Lee, she greeted them at the door. However, she tried to claim that there was no issue. She stated that she had met the female victim at a coffee shop earlier that day and that she had given her the keys to her home. The victim denied this, saying that she never gave Lee permission to do anything, let alone come inside and eat her food. Lee was arrested, but it wasn't until later that authorities filled in the final details. Apparently, Lee had sifted through the victim's mail after breaking in so that she knew her first name and some other details about her. Lee has now been charged with burglary and criminal trespass and remains in custody at the Dane County Jail. Authorities in Minneapolis, Minnesota say that a 10-year-old boy is facing charges this week following the release of wild surveillance footage which allegedly shows him recklessly driving a stolen vehicle through a school park where dozens of other children were playing. The whole thing took place sometime on September 20th on the grounds of the Nellie Stone Johnson School near North 27th and North Lyndale Avenues. The video shows a large group of children playing on the school's playground as a car speeds around nearby, making multiple passes as visibly concerned adults can be seen trying to figure out what's going on. At first, the car is driving on the grass behind the park, but eventually it whips by on the sidewalk just feet away from some of the children. Thankfully, no one was injured as a result of the incident, as school staff were able to move everyone out of harm's way. However, it's easy to see how things could have turned out differently. After investigating the incident, the situation got even more unbelievable when police were able to identify the driver. They now say that not only is the suspect a 10-year-old boy, but he apparently has quite the lengthy and disturbing criminal history. According to police, the 10-year-old has been involved in at least 30 reports since May of 2023 for crimes related to auto theft, robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon. In at least one of these incidents, the boy was allegedly part of a group of minors who attempted to carjack a woman at knife point, during which the victim was threatened and told, quote, "I will gut you." While the 10-year-old is facing a number of charges related to several of these incidents, as well as new charges of reckless driving and receiving stolen property in connection with the September Park incident, police have expressed their concerns that these types of situations aren't being dealt with properly. They say that due to the suspect's age, there is a significant chance that these cases will not move forward, but that there was also no support once kids like him are released back into the community. In this case, the boy's family has apparently repeatedly asked for help, but police say their hands are tied. In a statement released this week, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office directly laid out some of these concerns, stating in part, quote, "We are facing an urgent crisis in our community related to a small group of children who are not competent to stand trial in the juvenile justice system, but who cannot safely be at home. We are actively engaged with law enforcement as well as county and state partners about the critical need for safe and appropriate out-of-home placements for children with these complex needs who require specialized care. We cannot charge or prosecute our way out of this crisis. What we need is clear. Residential placements with varying levels of security in our community that are resourced and staffed to be able to accept and successfully treat our youth with complex needs. And we need urgent and immediate action to address this issue now."
Representatives from the Transportation Security Administration say that a 34-year-old man is facing charges following a wild incident last week in which he allegedly forced his way onto a commercial airplane and tried to steal it, only to offer a strange excuse for his actions. The whole thing took place sometime on October 22nd at the Missoula International Airport in Montana. According to reports, Alaska Airlines Flight 697 had just landed at its terminal and was in the middle of deplaning when suddenly a dramatic situation unfolded inside. It started when a 34-year-old man in the airport, later identified as Justin Reed Seymour, pushed his way through a TSA security checkpoint. TSA officers could be heard screaming and yelling for Seymour to stop. However, he continued towards the Alaska Airlines gate. An airline employee attempted to stop Seymour as he headed into the sky bridge, but they were quickly bowled over. Seymour allegedly attacked 2 flight attendants as well once he was actually on the plane, as they tried to stop him from getting into the cockpit. The 34-year-old was arrested there when backup from law enforcement arrived and were finally able to overpower him. After being taken into custody, Seymour offered quite the strange explanation for his antics. He claimed that he had tried to steal the Boeing 737 because, quote, "bad people told him to." He apparently kept saying he needed to get to Estonia and elaborated, quote, "All I had to do was fly the plane, but I didn't. I thought I was going to be able to." Though Seymour did manage to make it into the cockpit of the aircraft, it's still unclear exactly what his plan was. When asked if he could fly a plane, he reportedly replied, quote, "It seems easy enough to learn." Following his arrest, Seymour was taken to the Missoula County Detention Facility. He is now facing charges of felony robbery and felony aggravated burglary.
A Los Angeles family will likely be sleeping with one eye open for the foreseeable future after they made an incredibly disturbing discovery last week underneath the home of one of their elderly relatives. The whole thing started on the night of November 7th, when a man named Ricardo Silva and his wife were at his mother-in-law's house in the city's El Sereno neighborhood. That's El Sereno as in quiet, serene, or peaceful, something that will become quite ironic in just a second. Anyway, for weeks, Ricardo's 93-year-old mother-in-law, who owns the residence in question, had been complaining of loud noises that sounded like they were coming from underneath the floorboards. Ricardo said that this was mostly happening at night, so at first they thought nothing of this, believing it was a raccoon or some other kind of animal. However, on that particular night, they could tell something was up. The noises were even louder than usual, and when Ricardo's wife walked across the floor, it almost sounded as if someone was knocking back at them. That's when they decided to call the police. When officers arrived, they had a look around, specifically at the 2-foot-high crawl space that runs all the way under the home. That's when they spotted it. A naked man, later identified as 27-year-old Isaac Betancourt, who was hiding underneath there. Apparently, Betancourt was quite stubborn and far from shy when police confronted him. He refused to leave the crawl space and spent the next several hours seemingly withstanding everything officers could throw at him, including 2 rounds of tear gas. According to Ricardo, he wasn't afraid of the police dogs either. After the SWAT team was called in, they were finally able to flush Betancourt out with a 3rd round of tear gas. However, this wasn't until 4:30 the following morning. A subsequent search of the crawl space revealed a large amount of supplies, including food, blankets, and other items. Ricardo says that the 27-year-old may have been living under there for up to 6 months before he was discovered. Betancourt was arrested for trespassing and currently remains in custody. In the meantime, Ricardo says he and his family plan to secure the crawl space so that nothing like this ever happens again. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.